Chapter 1297. Luo Yu's eyebrows twitched. He said solemnly, "Please elaborate." He must have been blind. He thought Meng Hang was a gentle and kind scholar. He didn't expect him to be so crazy and decisive. No wonder he was Meng Zhan's son. His ruthlessness was inherited. Killing 1,000 enemies while sacrificing 800 men. Perishing together. Meng Hang sneered. Luo Yu's heart skipped a beat. Huang Song attacked Hu County for the food after the autumn harvest. We can burn it. If we can't get it, Huang Song won't get it either. Luo Yu's eyelids twitched. Burn it. Burn his own food? Crazy. Meng Hing said. Not all of it. We're burning the fields within 100 miles of the Sanshan Valley. If the food was burned, what was the point of Huang Song's attack? He could just cry in Mound River County. Luo Yu looked at Meng Hang with shock in his eyes. His breathing was rapid and heavy, and his eyes were bloodshot. Burning the crops within 100 miles of the fields. How could he bear to do it? In this era, people would sacrifice their lives for a meal. How could he do it? If you don't make a decision, you'll be in trouble. Meng Hang said coldly. General Luo, make a decision. Luo Yu squeezed the handle of the knife. His knuckles turned blue from the force. His bones were almost protruding out of his skin. It was obvious how much he was struggling. The choice Meng Hang gave Luo Yu was too difficult. No matter what he chose, Luo Yu couldn't bear to do it. Cheng Yuan held his breath and looked at the two with a complicated expression. Is there really no other way? Cheng Yuan helped Luo Yu speak his mind. Meng Hing said, Huang Song will attack the Sanshan Valley with all his strength. We can at most hold on for 5 days. That's at the cost of the lives of all the soldiers. My lord's army is restraining Huang Song's, but Huang Song is avoiding the battle. He'll use the terrain to delay them. It won't be a problem to stall for 10 days to half a month. By then, Hu County will be in Huang Song's hands. Is that what you want to see? The two were speechless. Luo Yu hung his head in pain. Meng Hang said, sacrificing 100 miles of fields in exchange for the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers and half of Hu County. Isn't that worth it? Luo Yu said. Advisor. In 2 months, it will be the autumn harvest, Meng Hing said. But we're exhausted after persevering for 5 days. How can we last until the autumn harvest? Since ancient times, wars had only involved seizing other people's territory and food. Who would burn one's own food? After a while, Cheng Yuan said, if news of the people burning a year's worth of hard work gets out, Meng Hing asked, isn't there a ready scapegoat? Luo Yu and Cheng Yuan were both stunned, not knowing who Meng Hang was referring to. Some people worked with Huang Song from the inside for wealth and glory. Why didn't anyone burn the food and take the opportunity to surrender to Huang Song? Meng Hing said, anyway, they're a bunch of people who are about to die. It's not too much to add another crime to them. Let their deaths be more worthwhile. Both of them were silent. What was the reason for the arson? Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Huang Song attacked Hu County for the food. Which idiot would burn the food as a sign of allegiance? As if he could see the two's doubts, Meng Hing said, it's just burning the fertile fields near the 3 Mountain Valley. We can say that the burning of the fields is to distract our army and mislead us into sending troops to extinguish the fire. This will weaken the defending forces of the 3 Mountain Valley. It's good as long as it makes sense. There was no lack of fallacies and ordinary people who were brainwashed by them. As long as the majority of people believed in alcohol, a minority would naturally choose to remain silent. Has General Luo made a decision? Luo Yu looked dispirited and said in a hoarse voice, if we can survive this battle, I'll personally ask for forgiveness from the Lord. Not only did he fail to defend the territory that the Lord had given him, but he also escaped by burning his own fields. Such an incompetent and prodigal performance made Luo Yu want to find a hole to hide in and never come out again. Huang Song's army came in a menacing manner. They were very ferocious and did not give anyone a chance to breathe. The two armies fought from day to night with the 3 Mountains Valley as the boundary. The gate of the pass was smashed by a giant tree once. If it were not for the timely use of dozens of saber carts to block it, they would not have been able to hold on for a day. Everyone was panic-stricken and did not dare to close their eyes at night, afraid that the enemy would take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Luo Yu transferred a few thousand soldiers to disguise themselves as ordinary guards and sneaked out of the 3 Mountains Valley in the middle of the night. Because of the war, The people nearby had already packed their belongings and headed north to avoid disaster. The fertile fields were left unguarded, which made it convenient for them to move around. Huang Song and the others did not choose to attack at night. Instead, they let the army rest and build up their strength, because the battle situation during the day determined that the enemy was more nervous than they were and did not dare to sleep the whole night. If they didn't sleep for a whole night, the enemy's physical condition would naturally be inferior to theirs, and they would have the advantage the next day. Based on the current situation, they would be able to take down the Three Mountains Canyon in 3 to 4 days. No matter how strong the enemy was, they were still mortals. It was impossible for them to not sleep for a few days. In the middle of the night, a faint orange light lit up behind the Three Mountains Valley. At first, it was not obvious, and Huang Song and the others did not pay much attention to it. As time passed, the orange light gradually spread and dyed the dark sky with an orange edge. After 2 to 4 hours, Huang Song was woken up by someone. What happened? Huang Song finally managed to fall asleep. Just as he was sleeping soundly, he was woken up by the ruckus outside. He tightened his pajamas and raised his hand to rub his sleepy eyes. Master, something bad has happened. There's a fire. Fire? What fire? Huang Song's mind quivered. He mistakenly thought that the enemy had come to set a fire at night and was so scared that he was completely awake. He grabbed Yuan Chong's hand and asked, "Where's the fire?" Yuan Chong could not explain clearly, so he ran to the observation deck with Huang Song. There was a dazzling line of fire on the horizon in the direction of the Three Mountains Valley. What's that? Huang Song felt like he was dreaming. Why was the enemy's rear on fire? Yuan Chong said, "The enemy's rear is on fire." I don't know who said it. The two looked at each other. At this moment, the enemy's rear was on fire? Huang Song suddenly had the illusion that he was the chosen one. He looked at the fire in the distance and vaguely felt that something was wrong. Huang Song asked, "Where's the location of the fire?" Yuan Chong could not tell him the specifics and could only give him a rough location. Huang Song's mind flashed and he was shocked. He quickly climbed down the observation deck. At this moment, Cheng Jing and the others also rushed over. Their faces were frighteningly gloomy. They checked the locations of the Great Universal Geographical Map and were shocked to find that all the locations of the fire were fertile fields. Such a big fire may not be extinguished in 3 to 5 days. They did not know how much grain that was about to ripen had been burned, but they knew that it was not a number they wanted to see. They're crazy! Huang Song's emotions suddenly exploded. He waved his hand and overturned the table. The bamboo slips and documents on the table scattered on the ground, and the table fell to the ground with a dull thud. In the Three Mountains Valley, Luo Yu looked in the direction of the fire and wiped his tears. Chapter 1298. Compared to the back-and-forth battle in Hu County, the Wanzhou battlefront seemed dull and boring. The person guarding the Wanzhou battlefront was Qiguan Rang, the commander was Fu Wang, and the troops he led were all elites. No matter what tricks Feng Ju used to lure and mislead them, the entire army adopted the safest strategy. It wasn't that Qiguan Rang didn't want to change from defense to offense, but he had Wanzhou behind him. If Hu County fell, they would at most lose a year's harvest. Next year, they would have to tighten their belts. If Wanzhou was lost, then the battlefront would completely collapse. Qiguan Rang knew this, so he didn't dare to slack off. He often deduced the enemy's tactics late into the night, so busy that he even forgot where to put the feather fan in his hand. Yes, that's right. The feather fan that Qiguan Rang never left his hand all year round had finally lost the favor of the main wife. Suddenly hearing that Hu County had fallen, even Fu Wang, the commander, couldn't sit still. Qiguan Rang was still calm and unperturbed. Isn't the advisor worried at all? Of course, Qiguan Rang said. If all of Hu County falls into Huang Song's hands, not only will they get millions of dawn of new grain, but the tens of thousands of elites under the Lord's command will also be lost. However, if we lose Hu County, we still have a chance to win. If we lose Wanzhou, it'll be hard to turn things around. The land of Wanzhou was the culmination of 7 years of his lord's hard work. Hu County's greatest value lay in its grain. Qiguan Rang knew very well which of the two was more important. Fu Wang let out a sigh after hearing this. He put away all his anxiety and nervousness. He seemed to have calmed down, but the aura around him was slightly terrifying. As soon as Fu Wang thought of the local forces in Hu County rebelling against Huang Song, who had backstabbed them in their vitals, causing the defense line in Hu County to fall and the army to have to retreat to the Three Mountains Canyon, he was instantly enraged. He gritted his teeth and said, "If the people in Hu County hadn't—" Qiguanrang frowned and looked at a spot on the sand table. He clicked his tongue. Maybe the Lord would be happy to see this. Fu Wang almost exploded in anger. How could the Lord be happy to see betrayal? The Lord seized the opportunity to clean up Chongzhou, but Hu County is not easy to deal with. Qiguanrang's eyes were cold as he said meaningfully, "Now that someone is courting death, of course, she doesn't mind them being bolder. If they know their place, who would the Lord kill?" Fu Wang furrowed his brows. He had a feeling that Qiguanrang was implying something. Although the general looked burly and honest on the surface, as if the general was all brawn and no brains, in reality, that was not the case. The scheming on the battlefield was no less than the fighting in the imperial court. A commander capable of commanding hundreds of thousands of soldiers in battle would not be a simple-minded person. Fu Wang probed. "Why do you say so? Could it be that my lord already had the intention to get rid of those people?" If that was the case, Fu Wang was even more puzzled. Other than the stab this time, the forces in Hu Commandery have been very obedient the rest of the time. There is no reason for the Lord to want to kill them so early on. Qiguanrang was startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. Perhaps. How can an outsider guess the Lord's thoughts? Fu Wang choked on his words. Qiguanrang was pretending to be deaf and mute. Qiguanrang obviously knew something but refused to say it. This made Fu Wang's heart itch, but Qiguanrang was tight-lipped and refused to reveal anything. Qiguanrang replied, "It's not a good thing to know too much." As soon as Fu Wang heard this, he knew that he should not continue to be curious. Even the cautious Qiguanrang said so it must not be a small matter. He decisively changed the topic to his opponent, Feng Ju. If Qiguanrang's steady style was a shield, then Feng Ju was a sharp spear, extremely aggressive and deceptive. Fu Wang occasionally lamented that Feng Ju had followed the wrong person to follow Huang Song. His temperament was more like the Lord's. If Huayu was not in Songzhou but here, it would be interesting for the brothers to fight. Qiguanrang said, "My lord deliberately transferred Huayu to Songzhou to avoid the brothers from killing each other." Fu Wang made a sound of surprise. "Aren't the brothers Cheng Sun and Cheng Yu on a warning?" Qiguanrang said, "Old Master Feng Ran is old and can't take the stimulation." Cheng Sun's death caused Cheng Cheng to become seriously ill. Many famous doctors said that he could not hold on any longer. If the same situation happened again, if Old Master Feng Ran was also sick, he might not have the luck to recover. Fu Wang said, "If that's the case, no wonder the Lord transferred the troops to Hu Commandery and avoided Nyesun. Is it the same reason?" Qiguanrang nodded. "It's rare for my lord to be so considerate." Fu Wang stretched and perked up. "The enemy hasn't moved for 2 days. It doesn't look normal." Feng Ju led troops to attack Wanzhou, but they were stopped by Fu Wang and Qiguanrang. The two sides were in a stalemate. A while ago, the battle was quite fierce, but these 2 days, it had become uncharacteristically quiet. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Fu Wang felt that Feng Ju was definitely up to something. Qiguanrang said, "If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. As long as something doesn't happen in Wanzhou, what tricks can he play?" The main theme of the battlefront in Wanzhou was defense. They absolutely could not push the battlefield into Wanzhou. This was the bottom line that the Lord had told them. It was best if Feng Ju was willing to stop for a while. Qiguanrang could take the time to make other arrangements. Reality proved that Feng Ju was a restless person. How could he waste his limited time on meaningless things? Fu Wang had a brainwave and said with a smile, "What if Feng Ju instigates the Feng family to defect?" "General Fu, do you know how long the Feng family has been around for?" Qiguanrang secretly rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Feng Ju instigates the Feng family to change their stance, but the premise is that the Lord dies and Wanzhou and Hu County fall into Huang Song's hands. Only by achieving this premise can Feng Ju have a chance. The Feng family has gone through several dynasties and several troubled times. If they don't even have the ability to protect themselves, how could they have survived until now? The Feng family of Shangyang was not something that the upstarts in Hu County could compare to." Fu Wang asked, What if Feng Ju forged a letter to force the Feng family? Qiguan Rang said. That's even more impossible. No matter how rebellious Feng Ju is, he won't be so cruel as to drag the entire Feng family into a situation of eternal damnation. You also know the Lord's temperament. She won't easily let go of those who betray her. No matter how stupid Feng Ju is, he won't do that. If he dares to do that, Old Master Feng Ren will be the first to step forward and strike Feng Ju out of the family tree, or even kill family in the name of righteousness. Fu Wang nodded as he listened. Not long after the two of them ended this topic, they were slapped in the face. Report, we've caught a suspicious spy. Fu Wang waved his hand and said, Spy? Bring the person in. As soon as he finished speaking, two soldiers escorted a woman in a summer gown into the room. The woman struggled as she walked. Fu Wang said, Is this a spy? The woman looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. Her black hair was tied up in a woman's bun, revealing her clean neck and collarbone. Her figure was plump, and her skin was delicate and rosy, like a ripe peach. She was also very good-looking, and her eyes were charming and moving, as if they could suck in a person's soul. Fu Wang took a look and was stunned for a moment, but he came to his senses the next moment. Chapter 1299. One of the patrolling soldiers had been holding back his pee so much that he begged his colleagues to switch shifts and secretly went to a remote place to relieve himself. Just as he was feeling good, he saw this strange woman. She looked strange and attracted the attention of the soldier. Based on the principle that it was better to catch 1,000 wrong people than to let one go, the soldier reported the news. The woman was very strange. Anyone who met her eyes would be so mesmerized that they couldn't tell north from south. They would do whatever she said. The soldiers originally thought they had caught the wrong person, but seeing this strange situation, they had to catch the woman no matter what. After a lot of trouble, they finally caught the woman. Fu Wang sneered and looked at the uneasy deputy general. Wild fox? I think you guys have been dry for too long. Everything looks like a fairy. He had high standards. How could someone so ugly be called a fairy? Ignorant. The deputy general was embarrassed. He also knew that this woman didn't look like a spy, but she was indeed abnormal. He had even found evidence. General, this is the letter we received from this person. The deputy general handed it over. Seeing this, the woman's eyes widened and she struggled even more violently. This woman was stronger than an ordinary man. Two adult soldiers couldn't hold her down at all. They needed another to subdue her. Fu Wang took the letter. There was still wax on it. He opened the wax and took out the letter inside. His fingers held the corner of the letter and shook it. After unfolding it, he read 10 lines at a glance. When Fu Wang read the letter, Qiguan Rang was squinting and yawning. He hadn't had much rest for several days and was easily sleepy during the day. General Fu, what's wrong? Fu Wang looked at the woman and handed the letter to Qiguan Rang in disbelief. He lowered his voice and said, Counselor, take a look at this. Qiguan Rang didn't understand. What's written on it? After reading it, Fu Wang took out the folded paper from the envelope. And this? Qiguan Rang knew at a glance that the paper was a detailed topographic map of Wanzhou, as well as the distribution of troops in various places. In this era, maps were not easy to draw. Detailed and accurate maps could even be kept as top secrets. The topographic map of Wanzhou was naturally the most important war secret. It wouldn't be easily revealed. The map in front of him was far more detailed than the maps Qiguan Rang knew. If it fell into the hands of the enemy, the consequences would be unimaginable. Apart from the map, there was also the letter. It was a letter from Feng Yan to Feng Ju. Who was Feng Gue? The current head of the Feng clan, Feng Ju's elder brother. Qiguan Rang had just said that it was impossible for the Feng family to be instigated by Feng Ju. Immediately after that, there was a spy carrying irrefutable evidence of collaboration with the enemy. What a slap in the face. Fu Wang looked at Qiguan Rang with a strange expression. Qiguan Rang frowned and read the letter over and over again. Where is he? Qiguan Rang asked. Fu Wang raised his hand and pointed at the woman. Here, but this woman's eyes are indeed a little strange. Counselor, you must be careful. Qiguan Rang took 2 steps forward. The woman lowered her head when he approached and did not struggle as violently as before. Looking at the woman, Qiguan Rang raised an eyebrow and lifted her chin, forcing her to lift her head. Fu Wang. Incredible, incredible. Qiguanrang's brows relaxed. He asked in surprise. It's you. The woman subconsciously shrank her shoulders, avoiding Qiguanrang's direct gaze. Fu Wang asked, do you know her? Could it be that this woman was an old flame of the counselor's? Qiguanrang did not pay attention to Fu Wang's thoughts. We've met a few times, but I haven't seen her in recent years. There were a total of 4 maids close to the Lord. One was Lady Xuanmei, who had been betrothed to Xiaoyu by the Lord. The other was Jiang Xiaowei, who had also been the Lord's maid. The third was Lady Huijun, whom General Fu should be very familiar with. The fourth is the person in front of you. Lady Takshu. When Fu Wang joined Wanzhou, Takshu had already been ostracized by Jiang Pengji and was later sent to Chongzhou. Therefore, Fu Wang had never seen Takshu before. Fu Wang was surprised. She's the Lord's maid? Yes, I haven't heard any news of her in years. I didn't expect to see her here. But why? Even if Takshu was no longer the Lord's maid, the Lord would not neglect Takshu based on their previous relationship as a servant. Even if she was not rich, it would not be a problem for her to be content with a little bit of wealth. If Takshu betrayed the Lord, she would be betraying her master. Who would trust her? Qiguanrang folded the letter and said lightly, keep this person in custody and let the Lord deal with her. It's not convenient for us to do anything. Fu Wang hesitantly pointed at the letter in Qiguanrang's hand. This woman is easy to deal with. Then this letter and map. If the Feng family betrays the Lord, Wanzhou will be the next Hu County. This is irrefutable evidence. If the evidence is proven to be real, will the Lord let the Feng family go? Hearing Fu Wang's voice, Takshu became nervous. She held her breath and waited for Qiguanrang's reaction. Qiguanrang said, how can we convict the Feng family based on a letter whose authenticity is unknown? Even if the letter is real, if we attack the Feng family now, won't we be forcing the Feng family to rebel in advance and forcing Huayu, who is at the front lines, to make a choice between the family and the Lord? Fu Wang wanted to say something, but Qiguanrang gestured for him to detain Takshu. General Fu, we can't be too hasty. Qiguanrang smiled. Don't you think that Lady Takshu is really strange? Fu Wang nodded. She is indeed a little strange. Qiguanrang said, this matter involves too many people. It's better to suppress it first. This matter concerns the Feng family's position. We have to be more cautious. Qiguanrang shook his head. The Feng family is easy to deal with, but I'm afraid it will cause the Lord and the Old Master to fall out. Fu Wang was shocked. The Lord and the Old Master. What does this have to do with them? Qiguanrang explained to him, Takshu was the Lord's maid in the early years, but she was personally chosen by the Old Master. The Lord sent Takshu to Chongzhou to send her back to the Old Master's side. Based on this relationship, does Takshu and the Feng family have anything to do with each other? They had nothing to do with each other. Even if the Feng family was really muddle-headed, the messenger should not have been Takshu. This person's relationship was too inexplicable. Fu Wang immediately understood and felt that things were getting tricky. Qiguanrang thought about it and wrote a letter to Feng Gue, who was at the back of Wanzhou, briefly explaining the situation. No matter what, this matter could not be hidden from the Feng family. If the Feng family had been framed, Feng Gue would rush over to explain as soon as he found out. If it was not framed, the Feng family would not dare to act rashly for a while. Of course, the possibility of the Feng family being framed was almost 100% unless Feng Gue was kicked in the head by a donkey to betray them. At this moment, Feng Gue was responding to his father's call to send his 2 legitimate sons to the Golden Scale Academy. Unsurprisingly, the next generation of the Feng family would be handed over to one of these 2 children. This indirectly expressed the Feng family's attitude. Chapter 1300. Feng Gue immediately packed his things and led his men to the front lines. Xiangyang district wasn't very far from the front line. It would only take 3 to 5 days to travel at top speed. Feng Gue arrived in no time. When Qiguanrang heard of Feng Gue's visit, he couldn't help but curl his lips. It looked like his judgment was correct. The Feng family had not betrayed them. After the 2 of them exchanged pleasantries, Feng Gue got straight to the point and explained his purpose for coming. Qiguanrang took out the letter and handed it to him. Qiguanrang said, "This letter was found on the spy's body." Feng Gue carefully took it and glanced at it. His eyes widened in shock. How could this handwriting? The handwriting on the paper was clearly his, and some of the words were written in the same way. Those who were familiar with him would not mistake it. Feng Gue put down the letter and said honestly, "To tell you the truth, this letter was definitely not written by me. However, the person who wrote it was very skilled. Even I was fooled. If it wasn't for the fact that the content of the letter was so horrifying, I would have suspected when I had written such a letter." Since even Feng Gue himself had said so, it was clear to see how well the forgery of this letter was done. It was enough to pass off as genuine. Qiguanrang said, "When I first read the letter, I was shocked. After thinking about it carefully, I felt that something was wrong. There must be a villain behind this. Clan leader Feng, why don't you go back and check the people around you? I don't think there are many people who are familiar with clan leaders' writing habits." Feng Gue thanked Qiguanrang sincerely. His trust had saved the Feng family from an undeserved calamity. If this matter reached Jiang Pengji's ears, she did not know what kind of disaster it would cause. The Feng family had been keeping a low profile all these years, but that didn't mean they didn't fight. There were too many changes in power in this chaotic world. Who could guarantee that a person who was in the limelight today would not be beheaded tomorrow? The Feng family was cautious in doing things. Even the sides they stood on were ambiguous. How could they openly communicate with Feng Ju to decide their stand? At present, the Feng family thought more highly of Jiang Pengji and had high hopes for Feng Jin. As long as Feng Jin had a firm foothold with Jiang Pengji and didn't lose her trust, would the Feng family have to worry about not having opportunities to develop in the future? How could the Feng family give up their principles and change their stance to Huang Song just because of Feng Ju? Just by thinking about it, one could tell that it was fake. It was just a setup by someone with ulterior motives. Feng Gue nodded his head solemnly in agreement. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, he didn't even dare to ask about his third brother, Feng Ju. Qiguanrang tried to sound them out again without batting an eyelid. He was only relieved when he confirmed that the Feng family was not a suspect. After Feng Gue left, Qiguanrang called a few more people over and asked, "Is there anything strange about that woman?" Takshu was under strict supervision, but this woman's eyes were evil. Her pair of charming eyes could make ordinary people forget themselves. Those who were not strong-willed could easily be instigated by her. In order to prevent Takshu from escaping, Qiguanrang ordered his men to build a small black house with green bricks. After they threw Takshu in, they sealed the exit, leaving only a small ventilation hole and a small door for food delivery. Even so, Qiguanrang was still worried. He sent people to monitor Takshu in 3 shifts a day. The soldier reported, "There's nothing unusual." Qiguanrang asked, "Nothing unusual?" He personally went over to interrogate her, but Takshu's reaction was cold. She had a cold and uncooperative attitude. "Lady Takshu, you have a master-servant relationship with our Lord. If you encounter any difficulties, you can tell us. Won't our Lord uphold justice for you?" Qiguanrang tried to persuade Takshu. "This place is very safe. No one can threaten you. You can." Takshu was not sure what he said. She snickered and said, "What master-servant relationship? That's a demon." Qiguanrang was stunned. His expression darkened. He had given her face, but she did not take it. She had slandered his lord in front of him. Who gave her the courage? Takshu's voice suddenly rose. "The real Lu she has been possessed long ago. Now, this is just a demon who has thrown the world into chaos." Qiguanrang's eyes darkened. He raised his right hand and waved his feather fan, indicating for the soldiers beside him to retreat. If they knew too much, they would die too quickly. Qiguanrang said in a low voice, "A man does not speak of strange powers and gods. What possessed demon? Lady Takshu's betrayal of her former lord is already a crime worthy of death. Now, you are splashing dirty water on your former lord. This cannot wash away your sins. If you still want to live, you'd better confess obediently. Don't play any tricks." Takshu shrieked, "The real Lu she has died long ago. Now, this is a demon who has thrown the world into chaos. Ever since she's possessed, she has brought war wherever she goes. The earthquake in Shangjing was also caused by her theft of the nation's destiny. You're helping the evildoer. You'll die a horrible death." Qiguanrang clenched his fists. The handle of the feather fan in his hand was almost broken. Takshu seemed to have regained her rationality. She snickered and said, "How much do you know about Lu Shi? I'm her personal servant. I know everything about her since she was young. Lu Shi is introverted and docile. She doesn't even dare to kill a mosquito, let alone kill a person. The real Lu Shi has been mistakenly killed by bandits a long time ago. Now, this demon is merely a dove occupying a magpie's nest and causing wars and massacres." Qiguan Rang did not speak. Takshu continued, "That demon is extremely terrifying. She possessed someone else's body, stole someone else's family, and used Lu Shi's identity to do whatever she wants. I hate it. I hate it so much that I can't expose this demon. She even dared to plot for the destiny of the world. Those who are not of the same race are bound to have different intentions. You guys should be careful. Who knows, one day, she might not be able to hold back and show her fangs and kill all of you." Qiguan Rang said, "There's no evidence." Takshu smiled coquettishly and said casually, "If I remember correctly, Mr. Qiguan Rang is the son-in-law of teacher Wei Yuan. Haven't you heard him talk about what kind of person Lu Shi used to be? Wei Yuan was Lu Shi's teacher. What I said could be false. Could your father-in-law's words be fake? You've all been deceived by her. She's the demon who incited chaos in the world." Even though the saints did not speak of strange powers and gods, the ancients were still very superstitious. Otherwise, the emperor would not have used divine authority to fool the people. The 5 countries in the world had collapsed one after another, and there were endless wars. If ordinary people heard Takshu's words, they might not believe it. Who was Qiguan Rang? He was a man that the audience called Big Boss. How could he be brainwashed? It was ridiculous to blame the war and chaos on a demon. So what if Lu Shi was not the current lord? From the beginning to the end, the only person he regarded as a close friend was the current lord. "You're more like a demon, aren't you?" Qiguan Rang said in a low voice, "It's a pity that your ability to bewitch people's hearts is not good enough. Since you blamed the war and chaos on one person, that's the biggest flaw. If you have the time, learn well. Don't come out and show off your half-baked skills." Takshu was extremely embarrassed by Qiguan Rang's mockery. "She's really a demon who possessed someone else's body," Takshu said. "Old Master knows that too. That's why he's been so distant from her all these years." Chapter 1301. Takshu's eyes flashed with horror, but Qiguan Rang could not see it as she was in the dark room. "Are you really not afraid that she is a demon who has possessed a body?" In terms of eloquence, of course, Takshu was no match for Qiguan Rang. She simply did not want to humiliate herself. She could only think of another way. "Let's not talk about whether he's a demon or not. Why should I question my lord just because of the one-sided words of a maidservant who abandoned her master?" Qiguan Rang asked straightforwardly. "Our lord is Rang's best friend. Who are you? You're just a maid who abandoned her master." On one side was the lord, and on the other was a maid who abandoned her master. Even a fool would know how to choose. Takshu, who was in the dark room, clenched her fists. Qiguan Rang's reaction was a blow to her. "So what if she is a demon?" Qiguan Rang said coldly. "This only proves that humans are more chilling than demons." What was war? War was an act of extreme violence initiated by humans for their own or group interests. They reshuffled the cards and distributed resources through war. In the end, was it not the greed and desire of humans? Qiguan Rang had known Jiang Pengji for almost 10 years. In the past 10 years, he did not see her seek anything for herself. Instead, she had been contributing. If all the demons in the world were like that, would there still be war in the world? It would have become a paradise in the human world. Qiguan Rang said again, "Compared to my lord, don't you think that you and the people behind you are more like evil spirits who bring disaster to the human world?" Takshu seemed to be provoked and retorted angrily. "Fool, the one I believe in is the real God who saves the world. The God you speak of is the one who hides in the side and secretly plots against my lord but does not dare to appear in the open? Since he is God, why doesn't he use his supernatural powers to send down rain and win over believers? Does God also need to hide and not dare to show himself?" Qiguan Rang sneered. "My lord has never hidden her identity. If she is really a demon, why didn't any powerful people come forward to subdue her? Isn't it their duty to kill demons and devils?" Comparing the two, Isn't it obvious who is more shameful and who is the evil one? Takshu was speechless. She could not explain Qiguan Rang's continuous questioning. Could it be that Jiang Pengji, the demon, was so powerful that the god could only avoid her and secretly persuade the innocent people not to be bewitched by her? Qiguan Rang laughed when he heard that Takshu did not respond. Do you know what you're doing? If the topographic map in your hands falls into Fengju's hands, Wanzhou, where he has lived and worked in peace and contentment for the past 6 or 7 years, will be obliterated and trampled by iron hooves. No matter how disciplined Huang Song's troops were, how could they guarantee that they would not disturb or injure the people? You say that you are gods, but the things you do are no different from evil spirits. Bewitching Qiguan Rang was obviously a stupid move, because this person saw things more clearly than anyone else. How do you mortals know the will of God? For the sake of peace in the future, what's the harm in sacrificing a few mortals? On the contrary, fools like you have been adopted by the evildoers' small favors. You're simply too stupid. Takshu sneered. There was a hint of madness in her voice. Let's wait and see. A demon will always be a demon. One day, you'll regret what you said today. I'll be waiting. Qiguan Rang flicked his sleeves and left. He sent more men to keep an eye on Takshu and instructed the guards to ignore her crazy words. He could not be bewitched by Takshu, but it did not mean that ordinary guards were immune. This woman was a little strange. After returning, Qiguan Rang immediately wrote a long letter to Jiang Pengji, telling her in detail about Takshu's situation. Jiang Pengji did not know that something had happened behind her. She first learned about Meng Heng and the others' heroic act of burning hundreds of miles of fertile farmland. When she received the news, Jiang Pengji was leading her troops to fight with Huang Song's troops near Hu County. Just as she thought, Huang Song's troops used the tactic of delaying, harassing and sending troops to obstruct them. They never confronted them head-on. Therefore, there was not much progress on Jiang Pengji's side for 2 or 3 days in a row. Seeing that the Sanshan Valley was about to be lost, she was extremely irritated. The most obvious manifestation was that none of the enemies who fell into her hands had a complete corpse. Yongxi did not dare to argue in front of her. If Wei Ci had not remembered to give her special treatment every day, Jiang Pengji would have suffocated from holding her anger. They were careful not to offend her, but the salted fish in the streaming room did not have this worry. He said what he wanted and complained what he wanted. Not only did he not avoid it, but he repeatedly mentioned it in the bullet screen of the streaming room. Ting Feng Chui Shu Gao. I'm so angry. I was pressed to the ground to wipe the floor tiles while playing games. I feel so aggrieved while watching the streaming. Jiang Pengji was in a hurry to rescue the Sanshan Valley. She was in a hurry, but she was harassed and delayed by the enemy. It was very annoying. It was as annoying as being hit with various deceleration and immobilization debuffs in a game when you were in a hurry to save your teammates. Shizuo Jujiazi. Guess the game and profession based on the ID. I sympathize with the person above. You beggar Yueqiang. I feel the same. The more I watch, the more anxious I get. I had the urge to stuff the Maserati in the garage into the screen of the streaming room, press the streamer to sit in the driver's seat, and race to the Sanshan Valley. Relying on the 2 legs of a human and the 4 legs of a horse, coupled with the constant harassment of the enemy, when the streamer arrived, the corpses of Meng Heng's cousin would have rotted to the point of oozing corpse oil, right? Genji Lianmu. Double-click 666. The person above is so rich. Pengji Chiowa. I have to remind you seriously, can the chassis of the Maserati withstand this kind of road? 850,000 salted fish gathered together. You can't expect them to not go astray. Often, the topic will go astray. Jiang Pengji felt annoyed just by looking at them. She simply turned off the bullet screen in the streaming room. Out of sight, out of mind. At that moment, a piece of news that was neither good nor bad came. A fire broke out near the Sanshan Valley. The fire spread and burned countless fertile fields. Fertile fields were burned? Jiang Pengji was surprised. How much was burned? The scout said. It said that the fire has been burning for 3 days and 3 nights. The losses are incalculable. Jiang Pengji knew that the fire was man-made. Meng Heng and the others had set it on purpose. Yang Si seemed to be mumbling, but he was actually speaking up for Meng Heng and the others. He said, we can't protect the grain, but we can't let Huang Song and the others take advantage of it. We have no choice. If Huang Song gets the fertile fields, he won't have to worry about the grain for the next year during the autumn harvest in 2 months. Huang Song had made Hu County the second place to fight for. Wasn't it for Hu County's grain? They were about to conquer the Sanshan Valley, but Meng Hang and the others did this. Yang Si was distressed about the grain and Huang Song at the same time. First, Yuan Xian was cheated by Hua Yuan of millions of grains. Then, Meng Hang cruelly burned hundreds of miles of fertile fields. They were really unlucky. Huang Song was speechless. Chapter 1302. Just as Meng Hang expected, the value of the grain to Zhang Pengji was far less than the elite troops she had trained with a lot of money. The grain could be replanted and harvested once a year at most. Who would she ask for the people if they were gone? It would take her at least 17 or 18 years to give birth to a child and raise the child to an age where he could fight a war. Zhang Pengji was considered wealthy. All the grain depots had prepared grain reserves for special periods. It would not be a problem to live frugally for a year. If the loss of the grain could be exchanged for their safety, then so be it. She could afford it. That was the confidence of a rich and powerful tyrant. She did not lack money or grain. She only lacked people. Everyone could guess what Zhang Pengji was thinking, but they were still worried that their lord would vent her anger on Meng Hang and the others. Regardless of the process, the result was that Meng Hang and the others lost Zhonghe County, burned countless fertile fields, and destroyed millions of autumn grain. If the Lord really wanted to hold them accountable, Meng Hang and the others were not innocent. Han Yu thought for a while, but he kept a straight face. He stood up and said, "Congratulations, my lord." "Congratulations?" Zhang Pengji supported her chin with her hands and turned to look at him. She frowned and said, "Why? What's there to congratulate?" The current situation was not bad, but it was not good either. Being forced by the enemy to burn hundreds of miles of fertile fields would not only hurt the enemy, but also hurt her own heart. Why was she happy? Zhang Pengji had seen 2 little tricks. Those who dared to say, "Congratulations," at times like this must be bluffed. She was not familiar with this kind of trick, but the salted fish in the streaming room were very familiar with it. The salted fishes sat on the small stools and knocked on their bowls and chopsticks, waiting for Han Yu to reveal the riddle. Han Yu did not disappoint them. He analyzed in a deep voice. Huang Song divided his troops to attack Hu County. His purpose was to get the autumn grain that was about to ripen in Hu County. With the Sanshan Valley as the boundary, the fire continued for several days. Countless fertile fields were burned down. Huang Song spent a lot of energy but only managed to get Zhonghe County. If Huang Song still insisted on attacking the Sanshan Valley, what else could he gain other than venting his anger? There were people in history who mobilized a large number of troops for the sake of personal feelings, but they were few and far between. Most of them did not end well. The battlefield was like a shopping mall. In the beginning, one would use up all their resources to fight, but after the battle was over, the spoils of war would be the harvest. If the value of the spoils of war was far less than the resources paid for the war, then they would not be able to make ends meet, and no matter how big their family business was, they would still go bankrupt. The question was Huang Song's family business big? Could this family business support Huang Song to attack a territory that had already lost its value? The answer was no. Zhang Pengji knitted her brows and said, "Based on Bogeo's character, he won't make a losing deal." If Chenzhou had not been harmed by Zhang Pengji and Hua Yuan, Huang Song might have sent troops to vent his anger. Now, he could only plan carefully. If the waves did not rise, they would calm them down. From this point of view, Meng Hang and the others were completely safe, because Huang Song had no extra energy to fight them. Han Yu said, "Huang Song's vitality has been greatly damaged. Behind him, Chenzhou is in dire straits, and there's no progress in attacking Wanzhou. In Hu County, there's only Zhonghe County left. It's almost a complete collapse. There's only one way for him to turn the situation around, to switch from offense to defense." Wait for what? Zhang Pengji thought for a while and asked tentatively, "Wait for the autumn harvest." Harvest the autumn grain in Zhonghe County? Zhonghe County was quite a large area, and its geographical location was close to the man-made river. It was also the place that produced the most grain in Hu County. According to the statistics of previous years, there could be around 3 million don of grain. With the grain, the morale of the army could be stabilized, and they wouldn't have to worry about the lack of grain in winter. Huang Song would never give up on Xueqi County. Han Yu nodded and said with certainty, "Yes, wait for the autumn harvest. He needs the autumn grain to revitalize the whole chessboard, but we don't." The situation of the war had changed several times, and Huang Song's life was tied to Xueqi County. The autumn grain was crucial. For Huang Song, it was something that could prolong his life, but for Jiang Pengji, it was of little value. At this moment, it was Huang Song's turn to be on the defensive. Jiang Pengji understood what Han Yu meant, and some malice flashed in her eyes. Huang Song, who was in the distance, suddenly shivered. She smiled and said, "Wenbin, you are right. This is indeed a good thing. Not only should I not punish Sergio, but I should also reward him." Han Yu's face stiffened. He only came out to put in a good word for Meng Hang, not to help him take credit. There was no need to blame him. The conversation between the two was short, and many viewers in the streaming room couldn't understand it. The turn of events happened without warning. At this time, it was the Chinese class representative's turn. Yizhan Qingxing. Isn't it easy to understand? The current situation is not in Huang Song's favor. To use a game analogy, he is being hit by bullets from all directions, and he can only survive. He can only rely on the bandage in Xueqi County to recover his health. Only then can he have a chance to kill the streamer. After a round of fierce fighting, the streamer has taken the initiative of the battle from Huang Song. Taking the initiative means taking a certain advantage. Now the streamer can either stabilize the situation and find a chance to give Huang Song a fatal blow, or take the initiative to attack and beat Huang Song until he has no chance to use the bandage. Sanying Zhan Lu Bu. There is another option, which is to burn the bandage in Huang Song's hand. After the analysis of the Chinese class representative, the idle people finally figured out the situation. However, what the hell is burning the bandage? It's not enough to burn 100 miles of fertile farmland, but also to burn Xueqi County? Jiang Pengji. Why not? When Huang Song learned that Meng Hang and the others had set fire to the farmland, he was so angry that he couldn't sleep for the whole night. His heart was burning with anger and all kinds of grievances. An emoticon could perfectly describe his current mood. "I can't hold back my tears. I can't stand it anymore. Wow." JPG. However, Huang Song was a man who didn't easily shed tears. No matter how many tears he had to hold them back. The more he held them back, the more uncomfortable he felt. He was so angry that he lost his mind. He ordered Yuan Chong to lead the troops to attack the Sanshan Valley. Even if the land behind the Sanshan Valley was worthless, he still wanted to get back at them. Before the troops could accomplish their mission, the scouts in the rear caught a group of suspicious people, which scared Huang Song so much that he instantly regained his senses. The group of people were disguised as ordinary merchants, but they had hidden flint, black oil, and bales of dry firewood on the cart. When the patrolling soldiers found them, they were secretly smearing the black oil on the firewood and preparing to ignite the wheat field. The smell of the black oil was strong, and the patrolling soldiers followed the smell to find them. If not for the patrolling soldiers' sensitive noses and timely discovery, Xueqi County might have been burned. Once the black oil was ignited, it was not easy to extinguish it. Hundreds of years ago, the ancestors of the northern borderline, the Qianggu tribe, built the Rotan Armor Army. They were burned to death by Prime Minister Huang Fu with the black oil. When Huang Song learned of this, he immediately ordered a retreat. He couldn't afford to offend them. Lu Lanting's men were all crazy. Chapter 1303. Huang Song didn't know if Meng Hang was addicted to burning, but he didn't dare to let his guard down. Meng Hang was indeed Meng Zhan's son and Lu Shi's cousin. He was ruthless to his enemies and to himself. Huang Song was terrified. He sent a large number of troops to patrol every day to prevent suspicious people from burning the wheat fields. Jiang Pengji had a big family business and was very generous. He couldn't afford to let his subordinates burn millions of acres of fertile land. He came back to his senses and explained the pros and cons in detail to Cheng Jing and Huang Song. Cheng Jing sighed and could only suppress the thought of venting his anger. When the autumn harvest was over, he wouldn't have to worry anymore. Before that, he had to bear with it. The originally tense atmosphere calmed down. Other than training every day, it was the repetitive patrolling and checking tasks. Not everyone liked boring tasks. Someone couldn't bear it anymore. Yuan Chong finished his training and noticed a familiar figure on the drill ground. His heart skipped a beat and he had a bad feeling. It was Yuan Xian's eldest son, Yuan Kuang. Yuan Chong hesitated for a while and took the initiative to greet him. He didn't want Yuan Kuang to accuse him of being rude and arrogant. Yuan Kuang's face was gloomy and his eyes were burning. He didn't look friendly. Yuan Chong sighed in his heart. He finally understood the grievances of military advisor Nie Sun. Nie Sun was strangely bitten by the mad dog Yuan Xian. He was strangely bitten by the mad dog Yuan Kuang. The father and son were poisonous. Yuan Kuang took the initiative to challenge him. The weather is nice today. Why don't you practice with me? Yuan Chong felt uneasy. He didn't want to accept the challenge, but he couldn't embarrass his opponent in public. Okay. Cousin, please. Although they were cousins, in reality, the two of them were already separated from each other. Their relationship was not close, and they did not speak much in the past. Yuan Kuang took after his father. Ever since he was young, he was always competitive and unwilling to admit defeat. When he was young, he was also fierce and aggressive. Yuan Chong usually took a detour around the other party, but he didn't expect to be blocked today. The two stood on the drill ground and cupped their fists. Before Yuan Chong could react, Yuan Kuang had taken the initiative and rushed forward with his sword. After 2 rounds, Yuan Chong's expression darkened. He realized that Yuan Kuang had developed a murderous intent towards him. This so-called sparring was aimed at his vitals. If it wasn't for Yuan Chong's solid martial skills, he would have been pierced through by the other party. The more they fought, the angrier he became. Yuan Chong forced Yuan Kuang back and asked in a low voice, "What is the meaning of this? Killing someone in public?" Yuan Kuang charged forward again, his moves becoming even more vicious, as if he wouldn't stop until he killed Yuan Chong. Yuan Chong was also infuriated. The two of them continued to exchange blows, and the shadows of their swords and sabers flashed continuously. The soldiers around the drill ground did not know that they were serious. Instead, they applauded and cheered. It was very lively. Yuan Kuang was getting more and more frustrated as he failed to take down Yuan Chong. He lost focus and gave Yuan Chong an opportunity to knock his weapon out of his hand. "Give me an explanation. If you don't give us an explanation, we will go to the Lord to judge." Yuan Kuang glared at Yuan Chong angrily. "If you didn't jump out to fight with me that day, I would have broken through the 3 Mountains Canyon. How would I have given the enemy the chance to burn hundreds of miles of farmland? Now look at the situation. Isn't it your fault that the Lord is in a passive position?" Yuan Chong was stunned for a second and tried hard to digest Yuan Kuang's words. He laughed angrily. "Things can change on the battlefield in an instant. What you said makes me laugh my head off." Yuan Kuang was really confident in himself. He led the army to break through the 3 Mountains Canyon on the first day. Did he think he was a god? The 3 Mountains Canyon was indeed easy to attack and hard to defend. But why didn't Yuan Kuang look at who was guarding the 3 Mountains Canyon? The elite troops that had been trained with countless efforts were all useless. Even if Yuan Chong had the advantage of time, place and people, he didn't dare to say that he could break through the 3 Mountains Canyon in a day. According to the calculations of the military counselors, it would take at least 4 days to break through the canyon. Didn't Yuan Kuang have any idea? If these elites were so easy to deal with, how could the Lord who led them become the strongest force in Dongqing? It was ridiculous for Yuan Kuang to blame himself for this. Yuan Chong secretly took a deep breath and suppressed the rising anger in his chest. He didn't want to poke a bloody hole in Yuan Kuang. Yuan Kuang glared at Yuan Chong. "You can't do it, but it doesn't mean that I can't do it." He was very confident in himself. If he was the one who led the army to attack the 3 Mountains Canyon that day, he would definitely be able to take it down and not give the enemy a chance to cause trouble. Yuan Chong, on the other hand, had made a military pledge at that time. What happened in the end? The 3 Mountains Canyon was taken down? Yuan Chong was a gentle and low-key person. He didn't want to fight with others, but Yuan Kuang wouldn't let him go. He was very annoyed. Yuan Chong had no choice but to secretly ask Cheng Jing for help and inform the Lord Huang Song through him. When Huang Song heard about this, he was even more annoyed. How did Chinzhou become like this? Wasn't it all because of Yuan Kuang's father, Yuan Xian? Yuan Kuang didn't reflect on himself and was a low-key person. He even jumped around everywhere, which was really an eyesore. Huang Song would show some mercy to Yuan Xian, but he wasn't so gentle to Yuan Kuang. He reprimanded him for his one-stop service. Yuan Kuang felt wronged. Because the Three Mountains Canyon was safe, Jiang Pengji didn't send troops to attack Zhonghe County. Instead, she planned to rest for a while and pay attention to the war situation in Wanzhou, waiting for the autumn harvest. If she fought Huang Song now, he could use 100% of his troops to deal with her. Naturally, she would be under a lot of pressure. During the autumn harvest, Huang Song would have to send troops to harvest food. If she sent troops again, hee. Apart from this reason, Jiang Pengji led the troops for a long journey and fought a series of battles. Her troops were exhausted and needed some time to rest. Therefore, the front line in Hu County welcomed a strange period of peace. There was peace there, but the smell of gunpowder was still strong in other places. The most intense smell was the front line in Qinzhou and Songzhou. Yuan Xian died, leaving a mess for Nie Sun to clean up. Unfortunately, Nie Sun couldn't cook without rice. He was criticized everywhere. Feng Jin didn't want to waste time here. Feng Jin didn't want to waste any more time, so he sent people to secretly spread rumors and spread the news of the food shortage in Qinzhou through the mouths of the children. When Nie Sun found out, the rumors had already spread to a large scale. There was no way to find the source. The grain stored in Qinzhou's granary was gone. The people within the borders were panicking. Those who had stored grain at home hid it well to prevent it from being forcibly taken away. Those who didn't had stored grain swarmed to the rice merchants to buy it. In just a few days, the rice merchants raised the price. The price of grain shot up like a rocket launcher. The people could only grit their teeth and buy it. The people who rushed to buy grain blocked the few long streets near the rice shops. As the crowd became more and more crowded, there was a stampede. When the sun set, the crowd slowly dispersed. Chapter 1304. The incident was so big that it inevitably reached Nie Sun's ears. Nie Sun stared blankly ahead, his eyes lifeless. The soldier who reported lowered his head in fear, feeling uneasy. After a while, Nie Sun still didn't move. The soldier plucked up his courage and looked up secretly. He saw Nie Sun holding his shoulder with one hand and holding the table with the other. His knuckles were white from the force and his pale forehead was covered in sweat. The soldier was stunned. He saw red and black blood seeping out of Nie Sun's clothes. He didn't care much and hurried forward to help Nie Sun. Nie Sun fell to the side. Medic! Medic! Help! Nie Sun's old injury reappeared. The wound on his shoulder that had just healed opened again. Fortunately, the wound wasn't long, otherwise it would be troublesome. After the doctor treated Nie Sun's wound, he gave the apprentices a prescription and asked them to get the medicine. Nie Sun slowly woke up. Is the military counselor awake? The deputy general who was guarding the bed shouted, and the other people also came over. Everyone immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Nie Sun's face was pale and his eyes were confused. It took him a while to recover his memory before he fainted. He was calm and comforted everyone in a weak voice. I'm fine. I'll be fine after 2 days of rest. One of the deputies said angrily, if those profiteers didn't take the opportunity to make money from the disaster and raise the price of grain, the military counselor wouldn't have fainted. Merchants pursue profits, and those who are ambitious are few and far between. They're just a bunch of greedy people. As long as they make money, why would they care about anything else? The situation in Qinzhou wasn't good. Those businessmen didn't fear death and took the opportunity to make money from the war. What a bunch of black-hearted people. They're short-sighted. They only care about profit. Why would they care so much? Several deputies expressed their anger. They wanted to send troops to kill all the black-hearted businessmen in the city who raised the price of grain. The more they spoke, the angrier they became. Their voices grew louder and louder until the military doctor interrupted them. Generals, the military counselor needs to rest and shouldn't make a ruckus. You can come back tomorrow if you have anything to say. Nie Sun's skinny hand reached out of the quilt and waved weakly, signaling the doctor to stop talking. He asked weakly, what's the situation outside? A deputy general stepped forward and reported, the rice shop is still unwilling to budge. The price of grain has increased by another 10%. Ever since the news of Qinzhou's food shortage spread, Rice merchants who had been hoarding food smelled a business opportunity. They took the opportunity to raise the price and sell old rice at a high price. Feng Jin did not send out many people to help. Instead, it was the rice merchants in Chenzhou who volunteered to help and acted as free tap water. They fanned the flames and caused a food shortage while peddling the stale rice in the warehouse at a high price. At this time, the price of grain was several times higher than usual. It could be considered a sky-high price and had long exceeded the purchasing power of ordinary families. Even so, the food supply was still insufficient to meet the demand. Basically, the moment it was put on the shelves, it was snatched up by the people who had lost their minds. The commoners who didn't have any stored food rushed to buy it, and the commoners who had stored food also followed the crowd, trying to buy more. The streets near the rice shop were tightly packed by the terrified citizens, and there was more than one stampede. Nie Sun was so angry that his old injuries acted up. Seeing that Nie Sun did not speak, the deputy general could not help but say, "Advisor, what should we do now? Why don't we capture those merchants?" Nie Sun asked him. The reason? If there was no suitable reason to arrest people, wouldn't it be indirectly admitting that there was a food shortage? An unconfirmed rumor made the people so crazy. If it was confirmed, the whole of Chenzhou would really be finished. The deputy general's face turned red from Nie Sun's questions, and he could not say a word for a long time. He really did not know what reason to arrest people. Another person said, "These unscrupulous merchants took advantage of the chaos to raise the price of grain. Don't they deserve to die? Of course we have to arrest them, but we can't use this reason." Nie Sun closed his eyes weakly and said weakly, "These merchants are selling old rice from a few years ago. Why don't we use another reason? For example, in order to sell the old rice they have hoarded to reduce their losses, they spread the rumor that Chenzhou is short of food to trick the people into buying food. What do you think?" The few of them were happy. This was a good reason. They could openly punish those merchants, and at the same time, they could put the blame of the rumor on the merchants and obscure the current situation of Chenzhou's food shortage. As long as the people calmed down and didn't cause trouble, Chenzhou could still hold on for a month or two. One of the deputies said, "We can delay it for as long as we can. In another month or two, it will be the autumn harvest. When the new rice is harvested, the food shortage will be solved." Nie Sun nodded weakly. Everyone saw that he was tired and chose to leave. When they all left, Nie Sun opened his eyes, and a bit of sarcasm flashed in his eyes. So what if they delayed it until the autumn harvest? Chenzhou had been at war for several years, and the harvest within the territory could not be increased. There was no way to fill such a big food shortage. If Huang Song had some support, there might have been a chance. But Huang Song had given up on Chenzhou. Otherwise, why hadn't Nie Sun replied to the message he sent for so long? As smart as he was, he had already guessed Huang Song's decision, but he could not tell the truth to others. Chenzhou was already in a precarious situation. If the soldiers knew about this, they would collapse overnight. Nie Sun's response reached Feng Jin's ears. He smiled and said, "Nie Qingyun's reaction is not slow." Meng Han shook his head and said, "I heard that when he heard the news, his old injury acted up again. I don't know how long his body can hold on." Feng Jin said, "It's still not enough." Meng Han was surprised. "Not enough?" Feng Jin smiled and said, "Here's our chance." At this time, he naturally had to fan the flames and add fuel to the fire, so that Nie Sun could not care about anything else. According to Nie Sun's idea, the rice merchants in Chenzhou who raised the price of grain and spread rumors were arrested, and the seized grain was sold to the people at a low price. Many people bought grain. When the others who were still watching saw this, they immediately lost the idea of buying, and the rumors collapsed. Nie Sun was very clear that this was only a temporary solution. After a long time the people would still find out. In order to stabilize the political situation, Nie Sun had to deal with government affairs with his injury, and he had less than 4 hours of rest every day. The military doctor tried to dissuade him, but to no avail, he could only let Nie Sun go. Since the old injury broke, Nie Sun's condition was repeated. It was not that the military doctor's medical skills were bad, but that Nie Sun did not follow the doctor's advice. Late that night, Nie Sun's body began to heat up again, and he drowsily slept for half the night. When he woke up, the room was dark. He tried to open his mouth to call for someone, but his dry throat could not make a sound. He could only sit up with difficulty and stagger out of the door. Nyesun raised his hand and wiped his burning face. Even his breath was hot. What is that? He struggled to open his sleepy eyes and found that the sky in the distance was dyed with a layer of orange light. Chapter 1305. Fire. Where did it catch fire? Nyesun's groggy brain seemed to have been cut by something. He immediately sobered up and grabbed someone. Where did it catch fire? The person did not recognize Nyesun. He rushed to put out the fire with a bucket and replied hurriedly, "The granary caught fire." Nyesun did not come back to his senses for a long time, as if he did not hear what the person said. At this moment, the military doctor who was in charge of taking care of Nyesun realized that he was missing and hurried out to look for him. The military doctor rushed forward to support Nyesun. "Counselor, where did you go? You still have a fever." Nyesun grabbed the military doctor's arm and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. He asked word by word, "Where did it catch fire?" The military doctor's expression froze and he said awkwardly, "Counselor, your health is more important. Leave it for now. The generals have already sent people to put out the fire. It will be under control soon. Don't worry. Go back to the tent and rest. We'll deal with it tomorrow." Nyesun's voice suddenly became sharp and he asked sternly, "Where did it catch fire?" The military doctor answered with bloodshot eyes, It's the granary." Nyesun choked when he heard this answer. He saw the world spin and his vision went from bright to dark. Soon he passed out. The fire burned until dawn before it was extinguished. Less than 1% of the food was saved. On the afternoon of the second day, Nyesun finally crawled out of the gates of hell and slowly woke up. However, he was not as energetic as before. His eyes were haggard. The military doctor who took care of him also noticed that there were several strands of white and gray hair on his head. He looked much older. "Counselor, Counselor is awake. Counselor is awake." Nyesun was so tired that it was difficult for him to even speak. However, he forced himself to sit up and slowly looked at the crowd. "The granary caught fire last night. Did you find out the cause?" Because of the high fever, Nyesun's throat was dry and hoarse. It did not sound like a man in his prime, but more like an old man in his 70s. The high-ranking officers looked at each other, but no one dared to step forward and answer. Nyesun was not in a hurry. Instead, he looked at them coldly. He changed the question. "Is the fire under control?" One of the deputy generals stammered, "It's already been destroyed." Nyesun asked again, "How much food did you save?" The deputy general said, "The fire was fierce last night, and the night wind was strong. In addition, the weather has been hot and dry recently. The fire was hard to contain." Nyesun looked at him silently. The deputy general was ashamed under his gaze. He decided to say, "The rations were badly burned. Not a single one of them survived." After he finished speaking, everyone stared at him accusingly. The military counselor was already in a very bad situation. If he didn't know how to speak tactfully, what would he do if he really angered the other party? Nyesun did not faint. It was as if someone had pulled out his backbone. His back and shoulders had collapsed, and he looked dispirited. "Not even 1 out of 100 survives," he muttered to himself repeatedly, which made people feel sad and uncomfortable. Originally, they could survive until the autumn harvest, and Chinjo could survive for a while. Unexpectedly, a fire burned all the rations they had. He let out a long sigh, knowing that there was no way to fight this battle. Chinjo had no other choice but to surrender. Nyesun could stubbornly defend to the end, but could the soldiers with low morale endure hunger and defend Chinjo? He asked again, "Did you find out the cause of the fire in the granary?" Everyone looked at each other, and finally, one person stood up to answer. "Yes, we found out," Nyesun asked. "What happened?" In order to prevent the enemy from attacking the granary, Nyesun sent a large number of soldiers to guard it. The patrols were rotated every 15 minutes, and the location of the granary was a top secret. How did the enemy still manage to burn the granary under such a strict defense? If it was not a man-made disaster, could it be a natural disaster? The deputy general stammered, and after a long while, he finally said a few words and slowly pieced together the whole story. This matter had to start from the time Nyesun sent people to capture the black-hearted rice merchants. He used the excuse that rice merchants were selling old rice and creating trouble as an excuse to arrest many rice merchants and confiscate their grain reserves. Those who had the capital to hoard so much grain in troubled times and make a fortune from the war were naturally not small merchants. Among the rice merchants who were arrested, one was a rich man in Qinzhou. His family had been doing business for generations and had accumulated a lot of wealth. In order to redeem his family, the rice merchant's younger brother was willing to exchange 200,000 dong of grain reserves. As expected of a tycoon, 200,000 dong in one go. Coincidentally, Qinzhou was in urgent need of grain, so this business couldn't be missed. Nie Sun rubbed his eyebrows and thought hard. Finally, he found the relevant memory. This was also allowed by him. Although it was despicable for the rice merchants to take advantage of the situation to raise the grain price, many rice merchants had backers behind them. They were either opened by the local gentry or had business dealings with them. No matter how angry Nie Sun was, he couldn't kill them all. He could only make an exception and release them after paying a certain amount of ransom. The rice merchant's younger brother used 200,000 dong of grain to redeem his older brother. However, he couldn't gather so much grain in such a short time, so he could only send it over from other places. The first batch of grain was 50,000 dong. The other 150,000 dong could only be settled with an IOU and a letter from his family. Nie Sun asked, 50,000 dong of grain? Did you check it when it was stored? The deputy general said, all carefully checked. Every bag is real. 50,000 dong of grain was a large amount. Naturally, they couldn't open every bag and pour it out for inspection. They could only do random checks. The cooks who carried the grain could also tell if it was real by touch. Unexpectedly, the grain depot caught fire that night. The night wind helped and the fire spread quickly. After fighting the fire for a whole night, there was not a single grain depot left. When the deputy general sent troops to catch the rice merchant, he had already escaped with his family last night. They couldn't even catch him. Sure enough, I still lost. Nie Sun curled his lips mockingly. The deputy general said helplessly, Counselor, we still have to think of a way. Nie Sun smiled bitterly. The grain we saved is not even enough for the soldiers to eat for a day or two. What's the use of thinking of a way? Unless the immortals could make grain out of thin air, there was no way to fight. At this moment, Nie Sun hoped that Feng Jin could lead troops to fight. At least, he could drag a few people down with him before he died. However, Feng Jin didn't do as he wished. Not only did he not send troops to attack, but he also sent people to start a fire in front of the formation to cook. Feng Jin said, it's not a loss to use 50,000 dong of grain to exchange for Qinzhou. Meng Han laughed. In order to curry favor with the Lord, that merchant not only doesn't want us to compensate for the 50,000 dong of grain, but also wants to give us 200,000 dong of grain. The situation in Dongqing was becoming clearer. These merchants also began to choose sides and invest. However, their lord was not so easy to curry favor with. Feng Jin said, we have to ask the Lord whether we accept it or not. Merchants chased after profit, and those with ulterior motives were few. They only had profit and money in their eyes. Qinzhou saw that Xia Kingdom was about to collapse, and it was normal for the merchants with keen senses to take the opportunity to change sides. Feng Jin took advantage of the merchants' desire for profit and took the opportunity to give Nie Sun a heavy dose of medicine. Chapter 1306. Even though Nie Sun did not want to surrender, the soldiers could only eat porridge for 2 consecutive days after their rations were destroyed. Rather than saying it was porridge, it was more like rice soup with a few grains of rice added. Other than the elites, many of the recruited soldiers secretly escaped, and more than half of them left overnight. Looking at the desolate camp, Nie Sun's mind was in turmoil. He was a patient and should have eaten better food. However, the military camp was short of rations and even his food was porridge. Are we really at the end of the line? Nie Sun sighed and raised his hand to finish the bowl of porridge. His stomach was empty and filled with water. 2 days later, more and more deserters and the security of the surrounding area suddenly declined. Many deserters were so hungry that they broke into people's homes to kill and rob. Many innocent people died in vain. Nie Sun wanted to stop them but he couldn't. The people were angry and Feng Jin took the opportunity to open the city gate. Meng Han and the others led the troops and went straight in. The people hid in their homes and didn't dare to come out. Sun had been hungry for 4 days and could only tie his waist to reduce his hunger. The medicine provided by the military doctor also ran out. Military counselor, it's not that I'm afraid of death, it's just that I have to take care of the elderly and children at home. The military doctor packed his bag and prepared to escape. Before he left, he was worried about Sun's health. He felt guilty and said that he was going to escape. Sun didn't blame him. Instead, he gave him a jade pendant which could be exchanged for some money. Go. The military doctor was sad. Before he left, he bowed deeply to Sun and left without looking back. Because of his illness and hunger, Sun soon fell into a coma. When he woke up, he smelled the fragrance of porridge. When he opened his eyes, the surrounding scenery was not the same as before. He was startled. A woman with a slight slope on her right foot came in. She wore her hair in a bun and her skin was a healthy wheat color. She didn't look as delicate as the women in the boudoir, but a little rough. However, she was in good spirits and there was a faint fragrance of medicine on her body. You're awake? You haven't eaten for a long time, so you can't eat meat or fish. So, I asked someone to make you porridge and pour some gravy over it to make it more flavorful. Eat it first to fill your stomach. The woman was wearing a soldier's uniform. It was obvious that she was a female soldier. She was definitely under Lu Shi's command. Sun looked at the woman, then raised his head to look at the decorations around him. He asked calmly, "I've been captured?" The woman smiled and said, "Mr. is not an ordinary person. He is not someone that ordinary captives can compare to." Sun did not understand. The woman explained, "The prisoners of war in the camp can be chosen by retired female soldiers. Sir, you definitely don't want to go there." Sun was silent. He knew there was such a rule in Jiangpengji's camp, and it attracted a lot of criticism. "Then you are." Sun's gaze was indifferent as he looked at the female soldier with curiosity. The military doctor taking care of Mr.'s condition. Mr.'s fever didn't subside and he almost didn't wake up. The woman put down the boiled medicine and got up to get something. She said, "My medical skills are not as good as those of famous doctors, but I'm much better than those quacks. Mister, you don't have to worry." Sun looked down and drank the medicine that the woman brought. His mouth was unusually bitter. He resisted the urge to vomit and drank the meat porridge that made his thumb twitch. After the meat porridge entered his stomach, there was finally a warm and solid feeling in his stomach. Sun took his medicine and ate his food. He did not seem like a captive at all. The female soldier did not mind telling him about the situation outside. Just as Sun expected, Feng Jin seized the opportunity to break through Chenzhou in one fell swoop. Within 5 or 6 days, he occupied the entire territory. Everywhere he went, there was no resistance at all. The people even spontaneously led the way for him. Feng Jin also cleaned up the mess left behind by the previous leader. He allocated 300,000 dong of military rations and recruited the deserters who had previously escaped. Soon, the situation in Chenzhou was stabilized. When Sun saw Feng Jin, his illness had improved a lot. When the weather was good, he could even walk a few steps. Feng Jin smiled and said, "Please forgive me for my poor hospitality over the past few days." Sun looked at him silently, as if he wanted to see through Feng Jin. "How do you plan to deal with me?" "Sir is the Lord's cousin. As for how to settle you, we naturally have to report to the Lord," Feng Jin said. "Before that, please rest well. The military doctor has treated you. If you don't rest well, it will be easy for you to get sick in the future." Feng Jin's attitude was very gentle. It was impossible to tell that the two of them had been at odds not long ago. Sun's eyelids were slightly closed, tacitly agreeing to Feng Jin's suggestion. "I heard that your wife is in the Yu family in Wanzhou. Cheng Yun seems to be Master Yuanjing's son-in-law?" Feng Jin asked even though he already knew the answer. He knew that Sun was different from Cheng Sun. The more he mentioned his wife and daughter's Yu family, the more Sun's attitude changed. Cheng Sun buried himself with his former master. Sun would never do such a thing. Not to mention that Huang Song was not kind and had mistreated him many times. Sun nodded and looked at Feng Jin with some desire in his eyes. Feng Jin said, "Master Yuanjing is the most respected scholar in Wanzhou. Who dares to offend him? Your wife brought her daughter to seek refuge with him. They will not be wronged. Sir, rest well now. When you see them in the future, they will not feel sorry for you. As they were talking, the military doctor who was taking care of Nie Soon came in with a change of medicine. She bowed to Feng Jin. Feng Jin bowed back and addressed her as Mrs. Jian. Nie Soon looked at the two of them in surprise. Feng Jin said, "This is General Diane's wife." Nie Soon was almost shocked. General Diane's wife? Dian Yan's wife? Mrs. Jian smiled and said, "Here, I am just a military doctor. There is no Diane's wife." Nie Soon had always been a very obedient patient. Now he was even more cooperative. Feng Jin made sure that Nie Soon had no intention of resisting. Only then did he leave with peace of mind. He only asked a few questions occasionally. He sent the news of the victory in Chenzhou to the front line. Huang Song was angry. Zhang Pengji smiled. Huayu has taken Chenzhou. We can't fall behind. Let's try to finish it before the new year. Everyone should have a good new year. The decisive battle between the two forces was basically set for the autumn harvest. As the days passed, the atmosphere became more and more tense. When Huang Song learned that Chenzhou had fallen into Feng Jin's hands, he was so angry that his head hurt. Because Nie Soon was captured, he could not tell Huang Song the details of the battle in Chenzhou. Huang Song only knew the gist of it. Looking at the battle report, Huang Song's expression was very complicated. If Hua Yuan had not cheated Chenzhou of its grain reserves, Chenzhou would not have fallen so quickly. When he thought of Yuan Xin, that idiot, Huang Song was so angry that his teeth itched. What the F***ck did he mean by tricking his teammates? After being angry for a while, Huang Song thought of Nie Soon again. His already complicated feelings were mixed. After a while, he let out a long sigh and raised his hand to put the battle report aside. Is there any progress on Huaijie's side? He needed a victory to boost his morale. Chapter 1307. Huang Song felt that the amount of sighs he had sighed recently was equal to the amount he had sighed for half his life. He was so worried that he was about to go bald. Cheng Jing said, Lu Shi has placed a large number of troops in Wanzhou. It will be very difficult for Huaijie to break through. Please wait patiently, my lord. Huang Song said, I know that too. Wanzhou was Zhang Pengji's nest. Although she was a wanderer, she still valued her nest very much. Otherwise, when she came back, she would find that her nest had been destroyed. Wouldn't that be a pain in the ass? If Wei Ci knew what these two people were thinking, he would probably laugh without saying a word. His Majesty, in his previous life, was really like this. The front line was fighting so hard that his nest was almost destroyed by Qiguan Rang. If it were not for the fact that she had returned in time and that Qiguan Rang's old master was a headstrong fool, she would not have been able to keep her lair. Even so, she still lost a lot of territory. Fuming puffer. JPG. In this life, Zhang Pengji asked Qiguan Rang to guard the base while she led her troops to war. Was this another form of retribution cycle? How strong was Qiguan Rang's defense? Back then, when Zhang Pengji had just taken over Xiangyang district, she was short of troops. The Tsing-Yi army sent thousands of troops to attack Xiangyang district. Qiguan Rang did not let the Tsing-Yi army gain any advantage even though the city was empty. It had been 6 or 7 years since that incident, and Qiguan Rang had become more mature than before. In comparison, Feng Ju was slightly younger. His experience was slightly inferior to the astute Qiguan Rang, but the gap was not huge. In a situation where the two of them were not too far apart in terms of ability, the soldiers under the tent played a decisive role in the outcome of the battle. Of the two sides, one was attacking while the other was defending. The defensive side's combat quality was far better than the attacking side. Qiguan Rang also firmly guarded the pass of Wanzhou, blocking all the routes that Feng Ju could launch a sneak attack on. He sent troops to guard it strictly, so that the enemy could not advance an inch. He had changed his usual treacherous style. His defense was steady. No matter what tricks Feng Ju used, Qiguan Rang did not budge. Feng Ju tricked his troops? Qiguan Rang was indifferent. He did not fall for it at all. Feng Ju would send his troops to fight head-on? That was good. The difference in quality between the two sides was too great. If the enemy came, they would only be asking for trouble. Feng Ju had tried other methods, but Qiguan Rang had countered every move he made. The entire defense line of Wanzhou had been turned into an airtight iron bucket by this person. Feng Ju had been shut out for several months in a row. Attacking by force didn't work. Scheming didn't work. Luring troops out also didn't work. It was too difficult. Fortunately, it was Feng Ju. If it were someone else with less patience, they would have flipped the table and started cursing. Feng Ju received news that his elder brother Feng Gue had stayed at the front lines for a short period of time. What is Big Brother doing at the front line? Feng Ju couldn't help but wonder. Could it be Big Brother is Lu Shi? At the thought of this possibility, Feng Ju subconsciously shook his head in denial. Based on the Feng family's way of doing things, it was impossible for Big Brother Feng Gue to become an official now. Because of this matter, he tossed and turned restlessly. Unexpectedly, Feng Gue stayed at the front line for 2 days before leaving. Feng Ju. What was Qiguanrang up to? After asking around, Feng Ju finally found out why Feng Gue had appeared at the front lines. It was because of a letter. This letter was said to be written by Feng Gue to his third brother, Feng Ju. The contents of the letter indicated that he was willing to lead the Feng family to pledge allegiance to Huang Song and work together to help Huang Song succeed. Feng Ju had come to the front lines for no other reason than to explain and prove his innocence to Qiguanrang. Feng Ju was stunned. He wasn't stupid. How could he secretly persuade his elder brother to lead the Feng family to pledge allegiance to Huang Song? If he really did that, his elder brother would be the first to expel him from the family and sell him to Qiguanrang. Feng Ju was a rebel, but he wasn't someone who wouldn't recognize his own family. How could he persuade his family to betray Jiang Pengji when Huang Song was obviously at a disadvantage? His family wouldn't agree to it. This was an extremely risky matter. Who would be willing to take the risk? Feng Ju's actions would harm the entire Feng family. Therefore, the existence of this letter was rather curious. Could this conspiracy theory be a self-directed act by Qiguanrang to test the Feng family's attitude and stance? Feng Ju didn't know the complicated plot of Takshu and Lu Shi's family. Therefore, his conspiracy theory was the most logical. This Qiguanrang is very evil. Qiguanrang. He had inexplicably become a scapegoat. As time passed, the day of the autumn harvest was getting closer and closer. There was still no breakthrough on Feng Ju's side. His most successful attempt was to break through the city gate. Unfortunately, the enemy's soldiers were not afraid of death. They used their flesh and blood to resist the attack, which bought them some time. Hundreds of war chariots blocked the gate. Seeing this, Feng Ju had no other reaction other than to sigh. Looking at his own troops, their morale fluctuated. Looking at the enemy's troops, even though the defense line was about to be broken, they didn't have the intention to escape or retreat. Instead, they became braver as they fought. Feng Ju had an unprecedented strong thought. It was infuriating to compare oneself with others. He really wanted to pull these people back and train them again. It was inconvenient to send letters at the front lines. After a few twists and turns, Qiguanrang's secret letter still reached Jiang Pengji's hands. She checked if there were any traces of the seal being opened. Then, she opened the secret letter and took out the letter inside. Takshu. Jiang Pengji read the contents of the letter quickly. Takshu's appearance, which she hadn't seen for many years, appeared in her mind. Back then, she noticed that Takshu was acting strangely. She simply kept Takshu under her eyes and monitored her. Then, she sent her back to Lu Shi's side. Lu Shi also acted as a matchmaker for Takshu. He let her marry into a well-off family. To put it bluntly, Takshu was just an ordinary person. She was a chess piece manipulated by the main system through Lu Shi's hands. No matter what, she had taken care of Lu Shi and Jiang Pengji for many years. As long as she didn't commit an unforgivable crime, Jiang Pengji was willing to let her go and let her die of old age. Unexpectedly, Takshu still courted death and ran out. She was really stubborn. Some disgust flashed in Jiang Pengji's eyes. If it weren't for Qiguanrang, Takshu's letter would have been leaked. Not only would it have driven a wedge between her and the Feng family, but it would also have caused her to go against Lu Shi in advance. At the same time, the map that Takshu had smuggled out of would have caused a devastating blow to the defense line in Wanzhou. She burned the letter after reading it. Just as the letter was burned to ashes, someone outside reported that Wei Ci had arrived. Let Zixiao come in. Wei Ci was holding a food box in his hand. Zhang Pengji only then remembered that it was time for dinner. What did you burn, my lord? Wei Ci smelled the strange smell of burnt paper in the air and asked casually. Zhang Pengji said, Wen Zhang sent a secret report from the front lines. Wei Ci glanced at Zhang Pengji's expression. She looked gloomier than usual. He had expected it. Could it be that Wan Zhou? Zhang Pengji shook her head. No, it's not about the war. Wei Ci didn't ask any more questions after hearing that. He took out the food box. There was a vegetable, a meat dish, and a soup. At the bottom shelf was a large pot of freshly cooked white rice. My lord, eat it while it's hot. Zhang Pengji began to eat. Her irritation subsided with a sense of fullness produced by her stomach. Zixiao's culinary skills are really getting better and better. It's just that there are fewer dishes, so it doesn't go well with the rice. Wei Ci said, My lord often says that I'm a feast for the eyes. Don't tell me that I'm not as good as those dishes? Zhang Pengji froze in the middle of eating. Chapter 1308. The salted fishes kept cheering for Wei Ci. Double-clicking 666, my friend. Other people either treated the streamer as a brother or a man, but Wei Ci dared to face the man head-on. He was simply a role model in the brave world. In the past, she had always felt that Wei Ci was too introverted and delicate. Now that she had seen him, he was amazing. His foundation in flirting with girls was very deep. The single dogs were unhappy that they were being fed dog food even though they were watching a live broadcast. Xingyue Onion, kick this pot of sour dog food full of love. Handsome lowly, the single dog rejected the dog food and threw it back. Shiyu, I was caught off guard by a mouthful of dog food. Baby refuses to accept this dog food. Xueqian, ha ha ha, a counterattack from the frog. Has the host been flirted with by the traveling frog? The salted fishes who were watching the commotion giggled, but the older salted fishes who insisted on being single felt threatened. Little Gong. No, don't you think that the host and Beauty Ci have been flirting with each other too frequently recently? What frequency was that in the past? Rain after a long drought. If not for the fact that the streamer would occasionally talk about Wei Ci, they would have suspected that the streamer and Wei Ci were already dead. What kind of frequency was that? Just like high school students, there would be a small test every 3 days, a big test every 5 days, and a monthly test every month. Yu Zishu, sigh, the streamer is no longer the single dog who is single with us. You have been expelled by the Single Dog Alliance. Yao Yun, even frogs know how to flirt. There's no place for single dogs in this world anymore. Zhang Pengji couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, she swallowed the mouthful of rice in her mouth. Otherwise, she would have lost her composure. Wei Ci readily took the empty bowl that she handed to him and filled it to the brim. He even pressed the bowl down a little. Zhang Pengji's appetite was several times that of an average adult man. Wei Ci was already used to it. He was not worried that she would eat too much. Instead, he was worried that she would not be full. In his previous life, His Majesty had a serious stomach disease. The imperial doctor said that it was caused by a long-term improper diet. In this life, he had to keep a close eye on him. He could not allow this person to act recklessly. What is my lord laughing at? Wei Ci asked. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, In the past, I always felt that Zixiao was a little dull and passive. Now that you've let go of yourself, it's really an eye-opener. Wei Ci smiled. It also depended on who the target was. Zhang Pengji covered her eyes with both of her hands. Her lips curled up slightly as she teased him. Zixiao, don't laugh. I feel uncomfortable every time you seduce me. Wei Ci's smile froze. His jade-like skin was stained with a suspicious redness. In terms of boldness, he was still far behind Zhang Pengji. The audience in the live broadcast room exploded. One by one, they were so angry that they turned into pufferfish, turning their grief and indignation into the power of ridicule. The bullet screen flooded the entire screen. Couldn't they just watch the live broadcast properly? Couldn't they wait until the end of the live broadcast to tease each other and feed each other dog food? Zhang Pengji refused. Who asked the salted fish in the streaming room to always say that Zixiao was their brain woman. She wanted to show them who Wei Zixiao belonged to. The idle spectators were left speechless. Jiang Pengji closed the streaming room on time and wrote a reply to Qiguan Rang. She carefully reminded him of the things he needed to pay attention to. Takshu was just a useless chess piece. The main system had thrown her out just to give it a try. If she succeeded, Jiang Pengji's hegemony would definitely be dealt a blow, and her progress would be temporarily halted. If she failed, she would just be sacrificing a dispensable chess piece. The main system would still be well hidden. Poor Takshu was still clueless. Thinking of Qiguan Rang's description of Takshu's appearance and demeanor, Jiang Pengji felt even more disgusted with the main system. Even if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she could guess what method the main system had used to bewitch Takshu and make her work for it step by step. Someone, send this secret letter to military advisor Qiguan of Wanzhou as soon as possible. The sooner the better. Jiang Pengji had asked Wen Zhang to guard Wanzhou, not because she was worried that he couldn't withstand the hardships of marching troops. Qiguan Rang was her confidant and confidant. There were some things that she didn't even tell Wei Ci, but Qiguan Rang was in the know. It wasn't that she didn't trust Wei Ci, it was just that Wei Ci and Qiguan Rang had different personalities. The latter was more suitable to do this. Moreover, Wanzhou seemed peaceful, but in fact, there were hidden thieves and hidden dangers. She needed Qiguan Rang to help her keep an eye on them. After she dealt with Huang Song and recuperated for a while, she would send troops to Nanxing. The situation in the world was basically under her control. She didn't believe that the main system, who was hiding behind the scenes and waiting to reap the benefits, would be able to endure it. As the autumn harvest approached, the hot weather became cooler. Jiang Pengji sent scouts to investigate everywhere, keeping a close eye on the situation of the fertile fields. Huang Song was also on guard against a formidable enemy. An invisible tension hovered between the two armies. At this sensitive moment, an unexpected person appeared in front of Jiang Pengji. On this day, she had nothing to do, so she led the troops to the nearby mountains for an autumn hunt. The prey was the fattest at this time of year. The food in the army wasn't good enough, but she didn't give herself any special privileges. She ate whatever the ordinary soldiers ate. She was bland and bland. Even with a beauty like Wei Ci watching her eat, Jiang Pengji lamented that there was too little food recently. Thinking that it was almost the autumn harvest and it was a good time for hunting, she wanted to lead the troops out to hunt. Everyone naturally stopped her. Wasn't she afraid of being ambushed and killed by the enemy if she went out to hunt at this time? Jiang Pengji raised her hands and promised, I won't go far. I'll only hunt in the forest near the camp. I'll hunt some small animals. I won't touch wild boars, wild bears, jackals, wolves, tigers, or leopards. I'll also go out with more than 100 guards. If I encounter anything wrong, I'll come back immediately. After much persuasion, Wei Ci and the others finally relented. Jiang Pengji didn't wait for them to go back on their words. She whistled for Little White, jumped onto the horse and ran. I've been too bored recently. I finally found a chance to get some fresh air. Jiang Pengji's words were directed at the audience in the streaming room. Qin Gong, who came along, misunderstood and thought that she was talking to him. Qin Gong held it in for a long time before he squeezed out a sentence. He stiffly interceded for the military counselors and generals. The gentlemen are also worried about the Lord. Salted Fish in the streaming room answered with a smile. Rusu Luo Mao. Qin Gong is young, so he still doesn't understand the streamer's combat power. If the streamer is released from prison, the unlucky ones will be others. Qingqing Jiha Yi, Jiang Pengji, nicknamed Jiang Ritian in the martial world. She's a woman who can do whatever she wants. Qin Gong is too young. Pia Pia Wiang. Let me say something inappropriate. I suddenly remembered that a certain prince was also a hunting enthusiast. When he went hunting, he didn't bring anyone with him. In the end, he was assassinated by Su Gong's right-hand man with a poisonous arrow. Streamer, don't raise this flag. You have more enemies than a prince. Rather won't take a postgraduate exam. If the streamer was assassinated by someone with a poisonous arrow, then the plot would be really amazing. Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen and tilted her head to look at Qin Gong with a smile. What are you worried about? Are you worried that I'll be assassinated by a poisonous arrow that suddenly shoots out from the forest? Chapter 1309. Look at how scared you are. I won't bully you anymore. Jiang Pengji smiled. You've all been plotted against, but I'm still alive and kicking. She didn't use her mental strength to deal with ordinary people, but it didn't mean that she wouldn't use it for her own benefit. She would know anyone who stepped into her mental strength field. She had a range of 10 miles, and this was a distance that she deliberately reduced. Who could shoot arrows from so far away? Stabbing people in the dark? There was no such thing. Qin Gong wiped the sweat off his forehead and said seriously, "My lord, my father used to say that the gods are watching over us. Some things can't be said casually. It can easily come true. My lord will naturally live a long life, but there are evil spirits hiding in the dark waiting for an opportunity to cause trouble." Jiang Pengji teased. "Feng Jing still believes in this?" Qin Gong told the truth. "I'd rather believe it than not." Jiang Pengji didn't comment, but she also knew that these little princesses were relatively timid, so she didn't want to scare them. In her mental strength field, all living creatures had nowhere to hide. Naturally, she would hunt accurately. She completely forgot her previous promise to everyone. She wouldn't touch wild boars, wild bears, or jackals, tigers, and leopards. She specifically picked those fierce ones. The big guy took 4 nests of wild boars. A family should be neat. The big wild boar and the small suckling pig were all graciously accepted. Qin Gong was stunned. He didn't know whether to say that his lord's archery skills were superb or that she was extremely lucky. The other guards could only follow behind Jiang Pengji and act as porters to carry the prey. Looking at Jiang Pengji's excited look, it seemed that she was going to plunder the entire mountain. Jiang Pengji hunted another 2 big bugs with white brows and eyes. The 2 big bugs, one male and one female, had just eaten and drunk their fill. They lay down and dozed off beside the skeletons of their prey. They woke up when they heard the movement. Qin Gong was about to say that the big bugs were dangerous, but his lord pointed at the fur of the big bugs. "The quality of this fur is quite good. We can peel it off and make a cloak. We don't need rabbit fur for our winter cloaks this year." Qin Gong did not know that when Jiang Pengji was in Langya County, others saw that she was mighty and bold. She did not show any mercy when she hunted the big worms. They compared her to a brave general of the previous dynasty and gave her the nickname, "Chasing the Tiger Across the Ravine." She ran into the tiger, so she was definitely not the one who escaped. Animals were more sensitive to smells than humans. They stared at Jiang Pengji and soon wanted to retreat. Qin Gong watched in a daze as the 2 white-fronted worms turned around and ran. His lord chased after them without a word. Qin Gong. He was absolutely sure that the military counselors did not need to worry about his lord. Instead, they should worry about the animals in the forest. When the lord came, the animals in this area would have to be sterilized. Before Qin Gong and his men could catch up, they heard the shrill roars of the 2 white-fronted insects, and soon, there was no more movement. Everyone watched as Jiang Pengji carried a large worm in one hand. Her long tiger tail and half of her body were dragged on the ground. Jiang Pengji shouted with a natural expression, "Come here and give me a hand. Don't ruin this good tiger skin. I need to give it to someone else." Qin Gong. Ever since Qin Gong could draw a half-stone short bow when he was 7 or 8 years old, his father and 2 brothers often took him out to hunt. His father and brothers were hunting enthusiasts. Qin Gong had seen all kinds of hunting postures, but he had never seen his lord's style. He glanced at the dead bodies of the 2 large worms and immediately understood how they died. His lord had crushed them to death with her bare hands. Jiang Pengji saw that he was in a daze and teased, "Do you want the tiger penis?" Qin Gong said, "No, my lord, you keep it to nourish your body." Jiang Pengji could not help but say, "That is an aphrodisiac. What's the use of eating it?" Qin Gong blinked his eyes in confusion. After a while, he realized that his lord was a woman. How could she say the words, "Do you want the tiger penis," so naturally? He vaguely thought that she was a friend of the same sex joking with him. Jiang Pengji carried the entire team. Most of the prey was hunted by her. Qin Gong's spoils of war were only pitiful musk deer and wild rabbits. Qin Gong was already so pitiful. Needless to say, the other guards were even more pitiful. The group of people carried their prey back to the military camp as if they were robbing a forest. "Today, we'll make meat dishes. Skin the 2 large worms. Send the bones and meat to the kitchen to be boiled into meat soup for the soldiers." The weight of the 2 large worms was considerable. Ordinary soldiers could still drink the meat soup and have a taste of it. Jiang Pengji had too much prey. She only took a portion of it. Most of it was given to the soldiers, and a portion was given to the little princesses. Where are Zixiao and the rest? Jiang Pengji asked casually. A deputy general replied, My lord, there are envoys from Nanxing. The military counselor is receiving them. Envoys from Nanxing? Her mouth was quite vicious. She said bluntly, Isn't Nanxing long gone? Where did the envoys come from? The deputy general said, I heard that they are envoys from Nanxing's and Shui. Not long after Jiang Pengji left to hunt, the patrolling scouts found a group of suspicious people and immediately stopped them. The other party took out the official diplomatic documents. The scouts did not dare to neglect them. They immediately brought them back and reported the matter to Wei Ci and the rest. And Shui? I have some impression. What's the name of the envoy? What's the purpose of their visit? The deputy general shook his head. He still did not know. Jiang Pengji simply spread out her spiritual force field, which allowed her to discover a rather strange mass of spiritual energy. In her spiritual force field, everyone turned into a mass of spiritual energy. Through the mass of energy, she could roughly determine the mental state of the other party. Most people were complete and mellow, but that person was different. His mental state was extremely active and unstable, and there was a tendency for him to split. Jiang Pengji immediately guessed the identity of the envoy. She smiled and said, Hua Yuan tricked Huang Song. Why didn't he go back to Shui's lair to hide and lay low for a while? How dare he swagger around and parade around the city? Is he too confident in himself, or does he not want to live? She guessed correctly. The envoy was none other than Shui's strategist, Hua Yuan. He was the man who had tricked millions of dawn of grain in Chenzhou without bloodshed. When Wei Ci heard that Hua Yuan had come to visit, he was also surprised. Because the people and matters in this life were different from the previous one, Wei Ci reacted quickly. He prepared to receive the envoy group that Hua Yuan had brought. He also wanted to test Hua Yuan's intentions. This fellow couldn't be unsatisfied after tricking Huang Song. Would he turn around and trick his lord? Wei Ci thought that he would never see Hua Yuan again in this life. He did not expect the two of them to reunite under such circumstances. After all, they were colleagues in the previous life. Wei Ci was more familiar with the states of Hua Yuan's personalities. He could determine which personality it was just by looking at the other person's appearance. The Hua Yuan in front of him was dressed very cleanly. He looked a few years younger than his actual age. His black hair was tied up with an exquisite crown. There was a faint scent of incense wafting from his body. It smelled good but was not cloying. His clothes were neat and tidy. The materials and workmanship were very particular. Chapter 13:10. The Hua Yuan that Yuan Xian saw was run down and reeked of alcohol. He couldn't even use a cloth to tie his hair and could only use a straw rope. His clothes were dirty, smelly, and ill-fitting. The lapels of his shirt were loose, revealing his chest. One could not help but suspect that he was a refugee. If the Hua Yuan that Yuan Xian saw was a run-down vagrant, the Hua Yuan that Wei Ci saw was a well-behaved son of an aristocratic family. Logically speaking, it should be Hua Yuan's primary personality. As far as Wei Ci knew, Hua Yuan's personality was somewhat complicated. He could act in a family drama all by himself. Hua Yuan himself, Hua Yuan's elder brother, who tricked Yuan Xian, Hua Yuan's deceased wife's lover, father, mother. In addition to these messy personalities, there was also a rarely seen person hidden in his body that was no less threatening than his second personality. It was the person in front of him. Hua Yuan's primary personality was a rather elegant son of an aristocratic family. Although he was weak and incompetent, his appearance was very deceiving. But the person in front of him was different. He had a fierce look in his eyes and always gave people an indescribable sense of oppression. Wei Ci could recognize him at a glance because he had left too deep an impression on him in his previous life. This person was also the core force that supported Shui in slaughtering 630,000 people from the four factions of Nanman. Wei Ci was naturally in opposition. In order to persuade Shui, he persuaded him several times. The last time, he even argued with Hua Yuan. In terms of eloquence, Wei Ci naturally won, but he greatly underestimated the danger of Hua Yuan's personality. The personality in front of him rarely appeared. He called himself the son of General Huban, Gu Chun. His appearance also came without warning. That time, Wei Ci and Hua Yuan parted on bad terms. He was about to leave the government office when someone suddenly covered his mouth and nose and dragged him into the side hall. That was the first time Wei Ci encountered Hua Yuan's personality. The other party was extremely strong. No matter how Wei Ci struggled, he could not break free. His neck was violently strangled. Wei Ci thought he was going to die there. Fortunately, a servant passed by and Wei Ci desperately made some noise. "Who's there?" The servant who was cleaning asked in surprise and pretended to come in to check. Hua Yuan released the hand that was strangling Wei Ci's neck. Before he left with a cold gaze that made people shudder. "Count yourself lucky. Anyone who stands in the way of my revenge against the South deserves to die. If you want to live, don't block my way." At that time, Wei Ci was half dead from being strangled. He was suffering from a severe lack of oxygen, and his eyeballs were so bloodshot that they were about to pop out of their sockets. He looked extremely terrifying. "Who are you?" Wei Ci was very sure that he had never seen Hua Yuan like this. "Gu Lin." Who was green? Wei Ci spent a lot of time looking for information about this person, until one day, he heard Bai Ning mention his master, Gu Chun. In the last years of Nanxing, General Hu Ben Gu Chun went on a punitive expedition against the 4 factions of Nanman. He made many military achievements and was regarded as the Nanxing god of war. Although Gu Chun's meritorious service shocked the emperor, she was loyal and devoted to the emperor. She helped the emperor eliminate many enemies that were an eyesore, and thus offended many nobles and aristocratic families. Some people instigated the relationship between the emperor and Gu Chun. The emperor was not a wise ruler who could distinguish between loyalty and treachery, so he more or less became suspicious. The political enemies framed Gu Chun, using the excuse of delaying the reinforcements and the supply of supplies, causing Gu Chun to be ambushed by the 4 factions of Nanman. Through Bai Ning, Wei Ci found out that Gu Chun did not die. He was lucky enough to escape and become a beggar. Gu Chun escaped death, but his family was not so lucky. Instead, they were accused of groundless crimes. On the way, Gu Chun's family was ambushed by the barbarians of the 4 factions of Nanman and died a miserable death. Hearing this news, Gu Chun was disheartened and became a beggar. In the end, he met the young Bai Ning and received his financial support. Bai Ning learned Gu Chun's skills and treated him like a father. After Gu Chun died of illness, he even organized the funeral for the old man. This Gu Lin was Gu Chun's eldest son. In the year of the incident, Gu Lin had just been married for 2 years, and his wife gave birth to a big fat boy. Gu Lin did not have time to experience the peaceful life of a family before his whole family died tragically in the hands of the Nanman. Hua Yuan's personality called himself Gu Lin, so his hatred for the Nanman made sense. Wei Ci had only seen Gu Lin twice in his previous life. The first time was when he almost choked Wei Ci to death, and the second time was when Xueqi slaughtered more than 638,000 Nanman people. Gu Lin had people bring over the 1-year-old children of the Nanman tribes and threw them to the ground with his own hands. Wei Ci was about to go mad when he saw the tragic scene. He still remembered the way Gu Lin laughed as he threw the children. If the children did not die, he would have stepped on them. Not long after the 4 factions of Nanman were destroyed, Xueqi's power declined greatly. His line of defense was empty, and His Majesty sent troops south to take advantage of the situation. Xueqi committed suicide, and Hua Yuan disappeared. Wei Ci secretly searched for him, and later found him in Nanxing Ningzhou. At that time, Hua Yuan had become a complete lunatic. He did not notice when the children in the nearby villages played with and bullied him. The villagers nearby pitied him and occasionally gave him some money. However, the naughty children went too far. Not only did they give Hua Yuan rotten eggs, dead rats, cockroaches, and bedbugs, but they also gave him pig dung as food. The silly Hua Yuan did not know anything, and thought it was food, so he ate it. When the children saw him eat it, they laughed and threw stones at him. Wei Ci could not bear to see this, and wanted to take care of Hua Yuan. Unexpectedly, Hua Yuan's body was found the next day, dead in front of his deceased parents' grave. Of course, that was all history from his previous life. Hua Yuan in this life was an enemy, and so was Gu Lin in front of him. Wei Ci received Hua Yuan as if nothing had happened, and tested him without batting an eyelid. If it was Hua Yuan, he could get some information out of him, but the personality that had appeared was Gu Lin. Gu Lin was not good with words, and looked very quiet. The companions who had come with Gu Lin also noticed the abnormality, and suddenly felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. They were afraid of Hua Yuan, because Hua Yuan was a demon who could change his personality at any time. In the eyes of ordinary people, he was like a ghost. However, Chui valued Hua Yuan, and they could not resist. Wei Ci's expression did not change, but he was surprised at Gu Lin's motive. Gu Lin had first appeared because Wei Ci had stopped Chui from slaughtering the 4 factions of Nanman. The second time was to take revenge by throwing the children. What about this time? What was the reason this time? Little did they know that Gu Lin's personality was the son of a tiger general, and he was most familiar with the military camp. People with split personalities had unusually active and unstable mental energy, which also caused their mental perception of the outside world to increase. The military camp was Jiang Pengji's territory, and the mental aura that she left behind stimulated Hua Yuan's mind. Gu Lin had appeared out of self-defense. Hua Yuan's split personality was a little different. The main personality did not know the movements of the other personalities, but the other personalities knew the main personality. Gu Lin knew that Hua Yuan had come as a messenger, but he was not good with words, so he could not complete the mission on Hua Yuan's behalf. Chapter 13:11. I wonder when Lord Lanting will be back? Gu Lin felt uncomfortable. He didn't like staying there as if there were countless eyes staring at him. Wei Ci said, "My lord is out hunting. It's about time he's back. If you're in a hurry, I'll ask around for you." Han Yu was still busy, Xie Zhe and Jiang Nongqin were training the soldiers, and Yang Si was nowhere to be found. Wei Ci was about to send someone to pass the message when Gu Chun shuddered. His eyes were filled with fear as he stared at the exit of the tent. Before he could figure it out, he heard familiar footsteps coming from afar. It seemed to be accompanied by an invigorating vitality. "Zixiao, I heard there's a delegation visiting?" Gu Chun heard the voice before he saw the person. He was like a beast that had encountered a strong enemy. His back was drenched in cold sweat. "Greetings, my lord." Wei Ci stood up and bowed. Gu Chun also bowed. "Greetings, Lord Lanting." Jiang Pengji knew who it was at first glance. After all, the mental state of a person with a split personality was too obvious. She couldn't ignore it even if she wanted to. "This is..." Wei Ci took the initiative to introduce Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji walked to the seat of honor and sat down. She asked Gu Chun casually, "What did Chui send you here for?" Gu Chun froze on the spot. He was born into a family of generals. He didn't like small talk. It was better to leave it to the professionals. Jiang Pengji clearly saw that Hua Yuan's mental state was active again. Several mental groups were squeezing each other, showing signs of splitting again. After a while, Jiang Pengji knew that Hua Yuan's personality had changed. His eyes were not as serious as before. Instead, they were frivolous. His standing posture was not as straight and strong as before. He bowed respectfully to Jiang Pengji and said a lot of formulaic things. Jiang Pengji's eyes lit up. Hua Yuan's personality disorder was interesting. He could switch personalities seamlessly. This personality was the culprit that made Yuan Xin cry. Hua Yuan's elder brother. Gu Chun finally squeezed back and kicked Hua Yuan's second personality out. A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Just tell me what Chui wants. Jiang Pengji listened for a while, then waved her hand disinterestedly. She stared at Hua Yuan and said bluntly, "I've heard of your heroic deeds in Chenzhou. And Chui got this huge sum of money for nothing. Don't tell me you're still poor?" Hua Yuan was not embarrassed. He said righteously, "Duke of Lanting, you're wrong." Jiang Pengji asked, "What did I say wrong?" Hua Yuan said, "If I hadn't taken the millions of grains stored in Chenzhou, how could the Duke of Lanting have gotten them so easily? So Chui feels that this deal is a loss and wants me to pay for the labor." Jiang Pengji teased him with a smile. "Master Hua Yuan came all the way here to help me succeed. This is indeed a favor. What does Chui want?" Jiang Pengji was a straightforward person. She did not have the patience to explain things clearly in a few words. She had to use a long speech to probe. And Xueqi had not sent Hua Yuan over to exchange pleasantries. There had to be a reason. If an ordinary person had been questioned by Jiang Pengji so rudely, they would have blushed and covered their faces in embarrassment. It was not shyness, it was awkwardness. However, Hua Yuan was a thick-skinned person who was not ashamed but proud of it. He turned a deaf ear to Jiang Pengji's overt and covert sarcasm. The Duke of Lanting is as straightforward as people say, Hua Yuan said. Hua Yuan said, "My master and the Duke of Lanting are old friends. My master has returned to his homeland many years ago. Even now, he does not forget the Duke of Lanting's help and life-saving grace. How can the matter in Changzhou be enough to make up for this favor?" Jiang Pengji listened quietly. When these literati talked, they were like pigs wearing bras. People who didn't know better would think that Xueqi was on good terms with her. And Xueqi would always remember her life-saving grace? Nonsense. She would rather believe that Zi Xiao would offer himself to sleep with her tonight than believe that. Hua Yuan was good at making friends, but Jiang Pengji did not fall for it. She laughed. "So you helped me for nothing? You really don't want anything in return?" Hua Yuan said to himself. The Duke of Lanting was indeed not an ordinary person. He was straightforward and harder to deal with than others. "It's my duty to help my allies. Moreover, you saved my master's life." Jiang Pengji could roughly guess Hua Yuan's intentions. If she was not mistaken, it should be to make friends and form an alliance. If he really did not want anything in return, why would Hua Yuan come all the way here? Did he really think that Xueqi's territory was close to hers? Only a fool would do this business if he could not even earn back the travel expenses after spending so much effort to come here. And Xueqi was obviously not a fool. And neither was Hua Yuan. Jiang Pengji gave him a way out. So Hua Yuan took the opportunity to reveal his true intentions. Just as she thought, the two families formed an alliance to help each other. Jiang Pengji teased. "And Xueqi is really not afraid?" Hua Yuan did not understand. "What do you mean, Duke of Lanting?" Jiang Pengji said, "I once formed an alliance with Xian Zhao, Bogeo, and Zhengze. Does Duo Shi also want to form an alliance with me?" Hua Yuan's smile stiffened. Xian Zhao was Su Bei, Jiang Pengji's former ally. In the end, she attacked Shanwu City, and Su Bei burned himself to death. Bogeo was Huang Song, Jiang Pengji's former ally. They were currently at loggerheads, and it was estimated that he would not survive the winter. Zhengze was Yang Tao, Jiang Pengji's current ally. They were not at loggerheads yet, but when Huang Song knelt down, she would definitely snatch Zhangzhou from Yang Tao's hands. The countdown to the loggerheads was not far. Now that Xueqi had come to form an alliance with her, was this a ticket to the next loggerheads? As a maniac with multiple split personalities, for the first time, Hua Yuan felt that he was a normal person, and Jiang Pengji was more like a maniac. Hua Yuan pretended not to understand Jiang Pengji's hint. He smiled and said, "Those who form an alliance with the Duke of Lanting are all heroes of the age. If my lord has this honor, I would naturally be more than happy to do so. If the two families form an alliance and help each other, when the day comes for my lord to expel the southern barbarians, the Duke of Lanting will reside in Dongqing, and my lord will reside in Nanqing. The two countries will forever form an alliance and advance and retreat together. It will be a beautiful story that will be passed down for generations to come." TSKSK. That was a good plan. And Xueqi was also very confident in himself. He wanted to set up Nanqing? Sorry, this farm was hers, including Nanqing. Jiang Pengji changed her mind. On the surface, she dealt with Hua Yuan, letting him see the hope of forming an alliance, but she did not give him a specific answer. After all, this matter still needed to be discussed with the group of princesses. And Xueqi suddenly proposed to form an alliance with her. She had a feeling that there was going to be a huge change in the power of Nanqing. If there was a huge change in Nanqing, it would be a good opportunity for her to take advantage of it. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. She would be the last person to use a slingshot to catch the oriole. However, before coveting Nanqing's land, she had to first defeat Huang Song and become the only feudal lord in Dongqing. At the same time, Huang Song sneezed out of the blue. Cheng Jing said with concern, "The weather has changed a lot recently. My lord, you must pay more attention." Chapter 13:12. Hua Yuan's sudden visit made everyone wary. Han Yu, Yang Si, and the rest had similar thoughts as Jiang Pengji. And Cui suggested an alliance at this time, most likely because there was a major change in Nanxing. They could form an alliance, but they had to figure out the whole story. They didn't want to be betrayed by their ally without knowing it. Thinking of this, they couldn't help but turn their attention to Wei Ci. Wei Ci was nicknamed Know-It-All, and was well informed. They didn't know that the Nanxing that Wei Ci was familiar with was the Nanxing of his previous life. He had only been to Nanxing once in this life, and that was when he had the mission of forming an alliance with Yang Tao. How could he have had the time to understand anything else? To Wei Ci, the current Nanxing was an unfamiliar existence. However, a big shot was a big shot. Even without the advantage of being a prophet, Wei Ci could still analyze from other aspects without affecting his pretentiousness. With the experience from his previous life and the information from this life, his understanding of Nanxing was incomparable to that of others. Wei Ci said, "I heard that the forces in Nanxing met and prepared to form an alliance to attack Nanman." Han Yu nodded. "I've heard of it." Everyone had heard of the news, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Nanxing was another country. They had to take care of their own territory first. Therefore, no one knew the outcome of the Nanxing meeting. Although the four factions of Nanman are cruel, they have a fatal weakness. They don't have many people. Their people live in barren and dangerous lands full of miasma. It's difficult for them to produce crops, Wei Ci said with certainty. In the early years, they conquered Nanxing and reaped great wealth, but they lost too many people. According to what I know, the four factions of Nanman had at most 1.7 million people before they attacked Nanxing. Including those who died in the war, I'm afraid. Without waiting for him to finish, Jiang Pengji asked a question she was curious about. The population of the four factions of Nanman is only 1.7 million? Jiang Pengji's expression was a little stiff. How weak was Nanxing? It was actually defeated by the four factions of Nanman, which had such a small population. Deducting the children under the age of 10 who can't participate in the war, the elderly, women and children, it would be difficult for the four factions of Nanman to gather 300,000 strong young men. Why was Nanxing destroyed? Although the total population of the 5 countries was only 60 million, it was not difficult for Nanxing to gather a population of 10 million. A country of 10 million people was destroyed by a small tribe of 1.7 million people. Nanxing was really a noob. Wei Ci shook his head. My lord doesn't know about this. The situation of the four factions of Nanman is unique and cannot be measured and calculated with common sense. Jiang Pengji was surprised and asked, "What's so special about it?" Han Yu was well-read and knew a lot of information. He immediately understood what Wei Ci meant. I heard that the four factions of Nanman have some strange customs. Under Wei Ci's gaze, he opened his mouth to explain. One of the customs is to abandon the old customs. The land of the southern barbarians is not easy to cultivate and there is a shortage of food. Regardless of men or women, as long as they are over 45 years old and are unable to carry a load of 2 stone, they will move to the mountains and wait for death in a cave of death, just to save food for the young and strong. Another custom was that everyone was a soldier, regardless of gender. The people of the southern barbarian tribe could go to the battlefield at the age of 10. Their bravery and ferocity were not inferior to ordinary adults. The destruction of Nanxing is expected. Therefore, don't be fooled by the fact that the southern barbarians only had 1.7 million soldiers. The number of soldiers that could actually go to the battlefield was definitely more than 1 million. The destruction of Nanxing was not only due to the lack of combat power, but also the internal aristocratic forces that were holding each other back. Naturally, the four factions of Nanman became more and more courageous as they fought. They also knew that they were weak, so the tribal chief never restricted the warriors in the tribe from sowing seeds outside. Instead, he encouraged this behavior. Every time they conquered a city, they would gather the captured women together and hold a celebration party so that the warriors could thoroughly enjoy their spoils of war. For the southern barbarians, the captured women were their livestock. They provided the palace with a moving machine to give birth to their people. However, how could their sowing catch up with the speed of population depletion during the war? It would take at least 11 years for a woman to give birth to a baby that could grow to the extent of being able to go to the battlefield. The feudal vassal forces within the territory of Nanxing kept contending with the four factions of Nanman. Over the past few years, the war had been incessant. The population continued to plummet and fell below the 1 million mark. The current population of 1 million, including the newborns that had been born during the years of sowing seeds, their real combat power was less than half of their peak. As the saying goes, strike while they are weak. If they did not counterattack now, would the new generation of children of the four factions of Nanman grow up? The four factions of Nanman could not withstand such losses, and the power of Nanxing gradually turned the tables. Wei Ci continued. In order to not give the southern barbarians a chance to rise from the ashes, they gathered all the feudal vassal forces to work together and destroy the southern barbarians in one fell swoop. This was expected. In his previous life, Nanxing was even worse. Nanxing was ravaged by the four factions of Nanman in various ways. There were almost no decent feudal vassal forces. It was different in this life. First, Xueqi joined the war earlier. He had Lu Zhang and Hua Yuan by his side to assist him. Yang Tao, who should have been operating in Dongqing, went to Nanxing. This caused the battle line of Nanxing against the southern barbarians to be more stable. The situation of the war was naturally more optimistic than in his previous life. Wei Ci collected these thoughts and continued. Previously, Hua Yuan proposed an alliance. He said, if the two families form an alliance and help each other, when Xueqi drives out the southern barbarians, the Lord will live in Dongqing, and Xueqi will live in Nanxing. This shows that the situation of the alliance is very clear. Hua Yuan also helped Xueqi obtain 1 million don of rations. Compared to the other feudal vassals, Xueqi naturally has a greater advantage. Even if the forces of the alliance were very united, there was a prerequisite for unity. The four factions of Nanman were their common enemy. Once the four factions of Nanman were destroyed, the external reason for the various forces to unite would be gone. The alliance would only exist in name, and it would be the turn of internal strife. If Xueqi could obtain the support of Dongqing's winner, Jiang Pengji, during the internal strife, the chances of sweeping away the other feudal vassal forces would be higher. Wei Ci said, Hua Yuan's alliance is real, but it's hard to say if he will turn against us after the alliance benefits. Jiang Pengji sneered. What's the point of turning against us after the alliance? Wei Ci was speechless. That's true. My lord loves to turn against us during the alliance period. She's very good at killing people she's familiar with. The salted fish in the live stream became more and more confused as he listened. Luoyu treading on flowers. Streamer, have you decided to form an alliance with Xueqi? What about the little cutie Yang Tao? Wasn't Yang Tao Jiang Pengji's previous ally? In any case, he brought troops from Nanxing all the way to Dongqing to help her restrain Huang Song and Su Bei. Even though Yang Tao's motive for doing this was to avenge his father, even if there was no hard work, there was still hard work. She also benefited from it. Tudu Feiqiu, don't you know that Yang Tao is still occupying Zhangzhou in Dongqing? Making friends from afar and attacking from close quarters. Serves Yang Tao right for being closer to the streamer than Xueqi. Free Lemon, you only know now that she's a heartless woman? Chapter 13:13. Jiang Pengji ignored Salted Fish's attack on her. She said, and Xueqi is quite confident. The combat power of the four factions of Nanman has been greatly reduced, but he is still a ruthless character. Can a few forces win by forming an alliance? Wei Ci knew why she said that. The alliance meeting at Huangshui was an example. A group of people who participated in the alliance never put in the effort. He said, the possibility of winning is far greater than the possibility of losing. The alliance meeting at Nanshui was different from the alliance meeting at Huangshui in Dongqing. The alliance meeting at Huangshui was to protect the emperor. The enemy was the fake emperor, Prince Changshou, who was trying to become emperor. To put it bluntly, it was an internal battle within the royal family. The feudal lords at the alliance meeting were idle fish watching the fun. For these feudal lords who had grown up, it was the same no matter who became the emperor of Dongqing. Therefore, most of them were just bystanders. The ones who rushed to the front were the spendthrift. They would definitely suffer the greatest losses. The feudal lords each had their own ideas. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength so that their wings would grow stronger and they would not listen to the imperial edict. Nanxing was different. The enemies of their alliance meeting were not their own people, but the four factions of Nanman. They were the barbarians of Nanman who were not of the same race and had different intentions. The barbarians of Nanman were a threat to the feudal lords of Nanxing. If the feudal lords did not join forces to suppress the four factions of Nanman, they might be killed by the four factions of Nanman when they were alone. For this reason they put in the effort. Their chances of winning were greatly increased. They were not fighting for righteousness. They were fighting for their own lives. Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and said, "In that case, it would be better if I agreed to the alliance?" Everyone's opinion was to agree to the alliance. They might as well form an alliance. Regardless of whether they were allies or enemies, they would be crushed by her in the end. And Cui knew that she was familiar with them, but he still came forward. He could not blame her. How could Hua Yuan not know what Jiang Pengji was thinking? Just from the words she said in front of him, "I once formed an alliance with Xian Zhao Bogeo, Zhang Zhe, and Duo she also wants to form an alliance with me." Hua Yuan knew that this woman was extremely aggressive, and the danger she gave him was no less than that of the southern man. Hua Yuan did not stay for long. When he received Jiang Pengji's reply, he left with the diplomatic group. Before he left, Hua Yuan's second personality maintained a stiff smile and said to her, "It's a pity that Nanxing has many things to attend to. It's a pity that I can't see the Duke of Lanting unify Dongqing with my own eyes. Here, on behalf of my master, I wish you good luck in martial arts." Jiang Pengji said, "Thank you for your auspicious words." Hua Yuan boarded the carriage and left under the escort of his guards. Other than him, and Cui's heir, the current young master of the An family, was also in the carriage. This 11 or 12-year-old boy was still wearing ordinary clothes, and he even smeared some dirt on his face to hide his natural good looks. His status in the diplomatic mission wasn't that of a young master, but rather that of an inconspicuous errand boy. After the wheels of the cart rolled forward for a quarter of an hour, they were already very far away from Jiang Pengji's campsite. Only then did the youth open his mouth to ask the question. "Sir, why are you and Mr. Lu so sure that Lu Shi will win? The situation changes rapidly. Huang Song might be able to make a comeback." Far away from the campsite, Hua Yuan's second persona's brows slowly relaxed. Staying in Jiang Pengji's camp, he was constantly on edge and couldn't sleep the whole night. He kept feeling that he was in a dangerous situation and could lose his life at any time. Now that he had escaped with his life, he relaxed. "What did you see at Lu Shi's campsite in the past 2 days?" Hua Yuan treated the youth as a student and a son, and he was very attentive in giving him pointers. The youth told him the truth. He was an errand boy, and he could occasionally interact with the military camp's logistics department. Their high quality and discipline left a deep impression on him. Hua Yuan listened carefully and said, "What you saw was the key to Lu Shi's victory." The youth was stunned. Hua Yuan said, "Since ancient times, history books only record the wise men and brave generals who have the ability to determine victory from 1,000 miles away. When have they ever recorded the ordinary soldiers? No matter how smart a wise man is, his plans are still empty words if they don't come to fruition. If a general doesn't have soldiers to fight for him, he's just a boorish man. What decides the outcome of a war is often not the most intelligent people or the most valiant generals, but rather the soldiers. People exaggerate the role of strategists and generals in a war, but they ignore the soldiers. They are the key to victory. Whether it's the strategist's strategies or the general's commands and dispatches, they are essentially auxiliary. It's laughable that people are so ignorant that they often put the cart before the horse." The youth carefully pondered Hua Yuan's words, and the confusion in his eyes gradually disappeared. Seeing this, Hua Yuan smiled lightly with relief. Before he could speak, he felt a sudden pain in his head. He couldn't help but raise his hand to press on his throbbing head. The youth looked at him and knew that his teacher had lost his mind again. He didn't dare to move and looked nervously at Hua Yuan. Hua Yuan rubbed his forehead with one hand and grabbed the clothes on his knees with the other. It took him a long time to recover. The youth carefully called out, "Teacher?" When his teacher lost his mind, he often didn't recognize him. He had to confirm if the Hua Yuan in front of him was his teacher. Hua Yuan looked at the youth with a strange expression. What's wrong? Where is this place?" The youth said awkwardly, "We're on our way back." "Teacher, do you still remember me?" Hua Yuan frowned. He changed his upright sitting posture to a very casual one, and a terrifying look appeared in his eyes. "What teacher?" Hua Yuan looked around and confirmed that he was in the carriage. His expression changed instantly. You kidnapped me? The youth was startled by the look in his eyes and asked, Who are you? Humph. And Xueqi has grown bolder, hasn't he? Hua Yuan said, I'm Lu Shi. Stop the carriage and send me back immediately. The youth was speechless. Oh my. No one expected Hua Yuan to split into another personality that called itself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. Wei Ci didn't even dare to think about such a terrifying plot. Even though Hua Yuan's personality called itself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting, and was stronger than an ordinary person, Hua Yuan's body was too weak. The newly born personality was still suppressed by everyone and tied up firmly. Hua Yuan messed around for the entire afternoon. The new personality finally fell into a deep sleep out of exhaustion, and the original Hua Yuan climbed back online with difficulty. The youth's eyes were filled with tears. The teacher called himself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. It was too terrifying. Zhang Pengji didn't know about Hua Yuan's magical operation. She was busy training her troops and preparing to kill Huang Song. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, the wheat fields were no longer green, and the heavy ears of wheat were dyed gold. Usually, at this time, the fields were full of people who were busy harvesting grain. The air was filled with a joyful atmosphere. But this year was different. There were no songs and laughter in the air. There was only a somber atmosphere. Huang Song sent his troops to harvest the autumn grain. He worked overtime day and night, and at the same time, he tensed up and guarded against the enemy's sneak attack. Zhang Pengji cracked her fingers, which made a crisp cracking sound. Chapter 13-14. The harvest in Zhonghe County alone is enough to feed a prefecture. I've only heard of the good harvest in Hu County, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I know that the rumors are true. Huang Song was busy harvesting the autumn grain. Zhang Pengji was full of malice toward him. Anyone who was not blind could see that he was well aware of it. It had been 2 days since the autumn grain was harvested. The amount of grain harvested surprised him. Hu County used to be a place that made people pale at the mere mention of it. Who knew that after Lu Shi's reorganization, it would immediately turn waste into treasure? Whether it was peace or war, grain was a currency that was harder than gold. With grain in hand, one would not panic. However, what Huang Song lacked the most was grain. Fortunately, by the time the autumn harvest arrived, Zhonghe County would be able to harvest 2 to 3 million don of new rice. Because the war had started early, the people nearby had been evacuated. No one had taken care of the fields for a few months. Fortunately, Zhonghe County had a good geographical location. This year, the heavens had given them face. The harvest could barely reach the average of previous years. On the first day, they had harvested 250,000 don of autumn grain. When Huang Song heard the number, he felt the beginning of the exclamation. To prevent any undue delay, Cheng Jing divided his men into 4 groups and implemented a 4-round handover method. They harvested the autumn grain day and night. They had to be anxious. According to the scouts, Zhang Pengji had frequently mobilized her troops in the past 2 days. It was as if she was sharpening her knives to kill livestock. If they did not hurry to harvest the grain now, how could they resist Zhang Pengji's crazy attacks while harvesting the grain after the war started? Cheng Jing and the others in Huang Song's tent were so busy that their feet did not stop moving. The candles in the tent were not extinguished all night. They continued to be busy when the sky brightened. Cheng Jing did not have time to fix his appearance due to his busy schedule. The green in his eyes became darker and his eyes were bloodshot. He was working hard, but so were the others. For example, Yuan Chong, who was on guard and patrolling, was so tired that he fell asleep every day. His strong body had also become thinner. Huang Song's forces were like a huge machine that ran at high speed. Every part of it was overloaded for a long time. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, Zhang Pengji was like the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. They had to squeeze out their potential. Cheng Jing had never felt that time passed so slowly. According to his calculations and plans, the autumn harvest would end in half a month. But today was only the 2nd day. They still had to be on tenterhooks and be on edge for 13 days. He finally knew what it meant to live like a year. Just as he finished counting the next day's harvest, He heard the sound of galloping horses in the distance. The sound of the horses' hooves was hurried and nervous. Cheng Jing immediately walked out of the tent and saw the scout heading straight for the main tent, so he hurried over. The scout, who was investigating the enemy's military situation, suddenly pulled on the reins and fell off the horse before he could even catch his breath. His helmet was already drenched in sweat. "There's an urgent report from the front line, my lord." The soldiers guarding the main tent did not dare to be negligent and immediately reported this to Huang Song. When Cheng Jing arrived, Huang Song was angrily throwing the bamboo slips on the ground. His eyes were wide open and his chest was heaving violently. His footsteps paused, and he bent down to pick up the palm-sized bamboo slip. He read it at a glance. The bamboo slip was not big, but it contained a lot of information. After reading it, Cheng Jing understood why Huang Song was so angry. There were 3 pieces of news written on the bamboo slip. Each one was terrible and extremely unfavorable to Huang Song. First, there was a change in the battle line in Wanzhou, which had been in a stalemate for several months. Qiguan Rang switched from defense to offense. He pretended to fall for Feng Ju's trap. He pretended to build a plank road on the surface but secretly attacked Chen Song, turning Feng Ju's army around. The army under Feng Ju's command was defeated. They had no choice but to retreat 20 miles. Their morale was low. Second, Feng Jin was firmly guarding Song and Chen prefectures. He had gathered 100,000 troops and pointed their swords at Haozhou. The general guarding Haozhou had suffered many losses and was in a state of emergency. Third, Jiang Pengji had trained her troops and deployed them several times. She had consolidated 120,000 troops to guard Hu County. They could attack Zhanghe County at any time. When Cheng Jing read this, he secretly added another piece of bad news to his mind. Fourth, Meng Hang and the others had been stationed at the Sanshan Valley and had not retreated. Once Jiang Pengji attacked, they would take advantage of the situation and attack from both sides. Each piece of news could bring great psychological pressure to a person, not to mention that they were all handed to Huang Song at the same time. Huang Song only angrily threw the bamboo slips on the ground. This was already considered self-restraint. Cheng Jing took a few careful glances and keenly noticed that something was not quite right. For example, the second piece of news. Feng Jin only had 30,000 to 40,000 troops. How could there be 100,000? In reality, Feng Jin did not have many troops, but he included the remnants of Huang Song's troops that he had captured. Feng Jin used 1 or 2 months to properly train these captured and deserted troops. When they attacked Haozhou, they would be pushed to the front line as cannon fodder. In troubled times, human life was the most valuable. Using cannon fodder to grind the enemy's head and fight for space for the elites was a very normal operation. 70 to 80% of Feng Jin's 100,000 troops were fake, but the 120,000 elites that Jiang Pengji had brought over were different. They were real elites. A total of 120,000 elites stared at Huang Song. Huang Song suddenly had the illusion that the outcome was already decided. Perhaps it was not an illusion. Huang Song fiercely suppressed the thoughts in his heart. Before the outcome was truly known, he could not admit defeat. Moreover, he could not show weakness in front of his own people. "My lord." Cheng Jing's voice interrupted Huang Song's wild thoughts. Huang Song looked up at Cheng Jing and said, "Yumo, do you have any countermeasures for the current situation?" Cheng Jing said, "Wanzhou has been under attack for a long time. There's no point in continuing the stalemate. It's better to let Huaijie withdraw his troops and return to defend Haozhou." He had some understanding of Qiguan Rang. The latter had always been a patient person. It was fine if he did not make a move, but once he did, it was bound to be a fatal blow. Qiguan Rang had endured for several months. He had stubbornly defended Wanzhou and refused to go to war. One could imagine how much anger he had suppressed in his heart. Feng Ju was the best target for him to vent his anger. Qiguan Rang had changed his strategy at this time and switched from defense to offense. It was obvious that he had grasped Huang Song's weakness, so he took the opportunity to attack. It was impossible for Feng Ju to break through Wanzhou's defense line in a short time, but Jiang Pengji could break through Zhanghe County in a short time. Qiguan Rang no longer had any worries. Naturally, he would not continue to endure and defend. He took the initiative to attack Feng Ju. Compared to Qiguan Rang, Cheng Jing knew Feng Ju better. Unlike Feng Jin, who was calm and thorough, Feng Ju was still very young. It was not that he was young, but that he had a young heart. Because of his outstanding talent, Feng-ju learned everything quickly. He did not need to study hard to surpass countless peers of his age. Others could only look up to him. Excessive smoothness would foster an excessive temper. Therefore, Feng-ju could not tolerate his failure. It was even more difficult for him to accept that he would fail. Feng-ju and Qiguanrang were in a stalemate at the front line of Wanzhou. It might be because Feng-ju's stubborn temper had flared up. If he were to give up at this time and choose to return to Hejian County dejectedly to defend Haozhou, Feng-ju would explode in anger. Thinking of this, Cheng Jing felt a headache coming on. Chapter 13-15. Huang Song's expression flickered incessantly. He seemed to be struggling violently. Sending Feng-ju back to guard Haozhou could stabilize the situation there, but this was not what Huang Song wanted. Yumo, I know your suggestion is for stability, but this is not what I want. He rejected it in a low voice. Without waiting for Cheng Jing to speak, he continued, Lanting has many troops. I'm afraid it will be difficult to defend Zhanghe district. Once we fail, we can only retreat to Hejian County or even Haozhou. In this way, Haozhou will become an isolated island in the sea, facing a situation where we are besieged on all sides. I don't want to be a trapped beast, struggling to survive. The current situation was extremely disadvantageous to Huang Song. He was not confident that he could defeat Jiang Pengji even though he was outnumbered. Although there were many examples in the history books of people outnumbered, the conditions for it to happen were extremely harsh. Under normal circumstances, most people would still be crushed by their opponents using numbers and strength. If Zhanghe district failed, Huang Song would face the situation of defending Haozhou alone. It would truly be a battle of a trapped beast. He was not as arrogant as the sons of aristocratic families, but he had his own temper and dignity. He definitely did not want to fall into such a situation. Cheng Jing understood and asked Huang Song, My lord, you mean? Huang Song muttered to himself for a while and said solemnly, Order Huaijie to bring troops here to rendezvous. If there's enough time, Jiang Pengji would make her move within these 2 days. Huang Song's news would reach Feng-ju. It would take at least 7 or 8 days for Feng-ju to bring troops over. Cheng Jing heard the dejection and despair in his words. At the same time, he was shocked by Huang Song's determination. Huang Song ordered Feng-ju to bring troops over to rendezvous. He was mentally prepared to determine the outcome in one battle. The two sides faced each other, blocking all paths of retreat. Either Jiang Pengji or Huang Song would die. No matter who lived or died, the end of this battle would be the end of one of them and a new beginning for the other. Cheng Jing could not say anything against it. After thinking for a long time, he could only sigh and agree. I'll draft up the transfer order now. Huang Song said. Okay. Huang Song's wife, Qi Chaolan, was a strong-minded woman. When her husband went to the front line to fight, she had to follow him from afar with hundreds of guards. She lived nearby to help him do what she could and share his worries. The relationship between the husband and wife improved over time. Thinking of this, Huang Song could not help but smile bitterly. In the past, she had always been worried that Madame Qi would run into danger when she came to the front line. Every time she went out to fight, she would tell her not to follow. But now, she felt that it was also good for her to follow. At least she could see her once, and she wouldn't have to die with regrets. Qi Chaolan looked at him with concern and asked, Why do you look so worried? Huang Song said, Talking about what happened outside will only make Madame worry for nothing. The two of them were not far from each other, but Huang Song had not seen her for almost half a year. He had a lot to say to her. When he wanted to open his mouth, he found it hard to say anything and didn't know what to say. Madame Qi said, Even if you don't tell me, I can guess most of it. In her eyes, Huang Song was an optimistic person. Even if he suffered a setback, he would quickly recover. He didn't like to bring his work home. Even if he had a lot of troubles outside, he would put on a nonchalant attitude in front of his wife and children when he returned home so that his family wouldn't worry. Madame Qi knew him so well, but Huang Song looked so worried this time. It was obviously not a small matter. It was very likely related to his family's life. Huang Song thought about it, then lowered his head and whispered, If I can't give you the highest glory, will you be sad? When he was young, He had suffered enough because of his birth. He had been despised and unfairly because of his birth. He knew what it was like, so he naturally didn't want his children to repeat his life. After getting married and starting a career, Huang Song paid more attention to this point. He didn't want his children to suffer. If it weren't for his good luck and his father-in-law's favor, Huang Song wouldn't have been able to marry Qi Chaolun. She had been wrong to marry him. How could Huang Song bear to let her suffer with him? In the chaos of Dongqing, his ambition grew day by day. When he dreamed at night, he also thought about that supreme position. He wanted Qi Chaolun to share it with him. Madame Qi said with a smile, "As long as Lang Jun is still here, even simple tea and simple food can be delicacies. Why should I be sad?" She said it so calmly that Huang Song didn't know how to react. Madame Qi said, "No matter who wins or loses, you have to be alive. This is the most precious thing to me. No glory or status can be exchanged for it." Huang Song choked and didn't speak for a long time. Madame Qi looked at him, and her heart couldn't help but feel sour. She had accompanied Huang Song from a teenager to a young man, and he was about to enter his 40s. How she wanted to continue to walk with him and meet him until they were old. "How can I bear to see you in a difficult situation?" Madame Qi sighed. "Do whatever you want." She and Huang Song weren't a husband and wife who respected each other, so she didn't want to use herself and their children to restrict Huang Song's choices. Huang Song's throat choked, and he didn't know what to do. His outstretched hands stopped in mid-air, and after a long while, he wiped away the eyesore tears with his fingertips. He said in a low voice, "Don't cry. These tears aren't hanging on your face. They're clearly dripping into your husband's heart." Huang Song and his wife had been married for many years, but he had only seen her eyes turn red once. That was when Meng Zhan proposed to promise a woman from the clan to him as a concubine to win him over. But now he had made her cry. Huang Song's heart ached so much that he couldn't help but blurt out all kinds of sweet nothings. Not only did Madame Qi not stop, but she cried even harder. She rarely cried, but once she did, her tears would burst like a dam that couldn't be stopped no matter what. Huang Song was quite frightened. Huang Song could only pick her up and coax her as if she were a child, saying a lot of nice things. "Your husband isn't a stubborn man. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. I will never commit suicide just because I am defeated. You are still so young, and the child is still so young. Without your husband's protection, I will crawl back even if I go to hell." Of course, Huang Song knew that if he was defeated, committing suicide with his sword was the best way to protect his family. But when Qi Chaolun cried so sadly, his rationality collapsed. "Besides, your husband may not lose. What if I win? Wouldn't that be a happy ending?" Even salted fish had dreams, let alone people. Qi Chaolun's tears had washed away all his despair and decadence, and Huang Song's fighting spirit was high again. He had to pull himself together. The situation wasn't irreparably bad. Huang Song tried his best to coax her for a long time before she stopped crying. That day, the husband and wife spent a long time together. Huang Song woke up before dawn the next day. He thought that he had gotten up very early, but he didn't expect Madame Qi to get up even earlier. Or rather, she hadn't slept at all that night. "Madam, take them back to Haozhou and wait for me to go back." She got up and helped Huang Song get dressed. She lowered her head and said, Okay." Watching Huang Song leave with his people, his figure gradually becoming a small black dot, her shaky emotions collapsed again. Chapter 13:16. Reporting. The sound of hurried footsteps and a loud report came from outside the tent. Qiguan Rang reacted a beat slower and asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" Taking advantage of the fact that he had planned this for a long time, Qiguan Rang suddenly suppressed Feng Ju and caught him off guard. Then, he played along and deceived a wave of enemy troops, forcing Feng Ju to retreat 20 miles. It seemed like a simple and easy victory, but in fact, he had taken a great risk. Qiguan Rang had been thinking about how to maximize the results of the battle for the past 2 days, so much so that he was overworked. His voice was much hoarser than usual. The messenger rushed all the way. His bronze cheeks were dyed red, and there were large beads of sweat on his forehead. He calmed himself down and couldn't help but say happily, "Military counselor, rejoice! The enemy has pulled out their camp and retreated. Pulled out their camp and retreated? Xueqi was stunned for a moment. He suddenly stood up from his seat, and the cloak that was draped over his shoulders slipped off his shoulders and piled up at his feet. He wasn't as happy as the messenger. Instead, his expression was solemn, and his eyes were frighteningly gloomy. The enemy has retreated? When did this happen? Could it be another crafty plot, a trick to deceive the soldiers? Xueqi felt that the few months of fighting with Fengju had exhausted a few years of his lifespan. All kinds of schemes had been continuously planned. If it wasn't him, but someone with a more impetuous temperament, they would have been cheated by Fengju and still counted the money for him. At this moment, Xueqi was most afraid of hearing that Fengju had come to stir up trouble again. It was simply too annoying and impossible to guard against. The messenger said, "Last night at the 4th hour, the lights in the enemy's tent were still burning. This morning, there was no sign of smoke or fire. We were suspicious and sent people to investigate, only to find that the enemy's tent was completely empty. Looking at the time, they should have retreated last night." Xueqi couldn't react for a moment. He wasn't sure if Fengju was really retreating or pretending to retreat to deceive him into sending troops. He couldn't be blamed for overthinking. It was because Fengju had too many past records. Xueqi had no choice but to be cautious. He said, "Send someone to investigate again." Not long after the messenger left, Fu Wang walked in with a displeased expression. He was still wearing the heavy and mighty armor, which made his already tall and burly body look even more sturdy. Coupled with his own imposing manner, he gave off the illusion of being cramped and oppressive just by standing there. "Military advisor, I heard that the enemy has retreated." Fu Wang was a cub raised by a wolf. He had a strong sense of aggression in his bones. Jiang Pengji had made him the commander-in-chief and asked Xueqi to help him defend Wanzhou. He had thought that he would be able to fight a battle to his heart's content. Who would have thought that the military counselor would only defend and not attack? After a few months, he was almost suffocated. It wasn't easy for him to change his strategy and switch from defense to offense, but before he could enjoy it to his heart's content, the enemy had taken the initiative to withdraw their troops. This made him want to spit out a mouthful of blood. What does this feel like? It wasn't easy for him to feel good, but he still had to time it. It was simply inhumane. Xueqi furrowed his brows and said, "That's what it looks like on the surface, but it's hard to tell if it's real or not. If Fengju turns around and attacks us again, it'll be impossible to guard against it." When Fu Wang heard this, his dim eyes lit up again. He flipped over like a salted fish. Unexpectedly, Fengju had really retreated and left without any reluctance. It was impossible for him to turn around and attack them again. Fu Wang anxiously urged the army to stay alert and wait for the enemy's return, but he was disappointed in the end. Is he really retreating? Fu Wang felt even more pained. He had been guarding Wanzhou for so long that mushrooms were about to grow. Yet Fengju just ran away after provoking him. Was he still a man? He was definitely not a man. Xueqi was also surprised. Fu Wang suggested excitedly, "Military advisor, should we send troops to chase after him? It's only been a day since they retreated. If they travel day and night, they'll definitely be able to catch up." Xueqi was frowning as he looked at the sand table. The general direction in which the enemy had retreated was marked on it. "General, what do you think is the reason for Fengju's withdrawal?" Fu Wang was warlike, but he wasn't brainless. He carefully looked at the sand table and pondered the direction in which the enemy had retreated. He could more or less guess the reason. It's time for the autumn harvest. Our Lord has been patient for a long time. It's like an arrow knocked on the bowstring against Huang's song. Fu Wang deliberated and said, "If Fengju's withdrawal isn't fake, he's most likely leading his troops to support Huang's song. That's not right. What is Huang's song trying to do?" Fengju supporting Huang's song was equivalent to gathering about 80% of his troops in one place. Was he planning to confront the two armies and have a decisive battle? Xueqi pinched his brows and said in a low voice, "If Fengju's withdrawal is true, it should be for this." Fu Wang said worriedly, "Huang's song has a lot of troops. I'm afraid there's going to be a tough battle on our Lord's side. Military advisor, are we really not going to lead troops to chase and intercept them? If Fengju was intercepted, Huang's song would have one less helper." The pressure on Jiang Pengji's side would also be reduced. Qiguanrang said, if we lead troops to intercept them, what will happen to Wanzhou? Our duty is to ensure that Wanzhou is safe. We can't take any risks. Fu Wang said again, but our lord. Qiguanrang looked as if he could see through Fu Wang's expression. He carefully analyzed the situation for him. If Huang Song's two armies successfully join forces, they will have a total of 160,000 to 180,000 troops. This is an exaggerated figure. Our lord has about 120,000 troops under her command. If we include General Luoyue's troops, their military strength will be equal to Huang Song's. Our lord has spent a lot of effort and a lot of money to build these troops. Huang Song's chances of winning are only 30% at most. The more Fu Wang listened, the darker his eyes became. He was like a salted fish that had lost its dreams, a small fish stranded on the beach. Qiguanrang continued, in terms of momentum, Huang Song has suffered repeated blows and is in low spirits. He is far inferior to our lord. His chances of winning are even lower. As long as our lord doesn't make any mistakes and doesn't make any irreparable mistakes, victory is in our hands. He was very reassured about his lord's situation, so Fu Wang should give up on the idea of leading troops to pursue and attack. Fu Wang was speechless. Jiang Pengji did have an advantage over Huang Song, but this advantage could not guarantee victory. Out of respect for Huang Song, she did not do it half-heartedly. As early as when Feng Ju received the secret letter and led his troops to evacuate Wanzhou, Jiang Pengji had already begun to attack Huang Song. Huang Song could only hastily fight while harvesting the autumn rations. Luo Yue was unwilling to be left alone in the Sanshan Valley. He responded to his lord's orders and cooperated with her to attack Huang Song. Huang Song could only divide his troops into several waves. Fortunately, the Sanshan Valley was easy to attack and difficult to defend. There was still a natural terrain at the border of Hu County that they could rely on. Although they were somewhat distressed, the situation was still stable and they did not collapse. This was not good news, but it was not bad news either. Huang Song abandoned all distracting thoughts and focused on the war. Yumo, how is the autumn rations harvest going? Qing Jing said, we've collected 50%. According to the original progress, it was at most 30%, but Cheng Jing had arranged for the soldiers to rush day and night and repeatedly compress time to barely achieve this efficiency. Huang Song silently calculated in his heart. 50% of the autumn rations would be more than 1.2 million dong, enough for the army to eat. Huang Song said, Zhanghe County is not a long-term place. The longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for us. Zhanghe County itself was not an easy place to defend, not to mention that the enemy was attacking from two sides at the same time. Chapter 13:17. I have the same idea. Qing Jing said, my lord, please look here. Qing Jing understood Huang Song's plan. Defending Zhanghe district was not a good idea. The greatest value of this place was in the grain. Now that they had harvested 50% of the grain, it was enough for the army to eat for the next few months. This battle would not last long, so it was meaningless to continue harvesting the remaining autumn grain. Huang Song planned to withdraw his troops and leave Zhanghe district. Coincidentally, Cheng Jing had a good place to go. Where? Huang Song looked in the direction Cheng Jing was pointing. What is this place? Cheng Jing said, this place is called Changye. Changye. Huang Song was surprised. It sounds familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen it before. Cheng Jing said, Changye used to be under the jurisdiction of Hu County during the Xia dynasty. Later on, strange phenomena occurred, causing the people here to migrate. As time went by, there was no one here. When Dongqing was founded, it was separated from Hu County when the prefectures and counties were redivided. According to Cheng Jing, this place was a secluded place that everyone avoided. Huang Song thought for a long time but could not remember where he had heard of this place. Qing Jing continued, my lord, you must have forgotten that Changye was once the burial place of someone. His reminder immediately reminded Huang Song of something written in a random collection. The first prime minister of the Xia dynasty was buried here. What strange phenomena happened in Changye? Huang Song asked. Cheng Jing said, in the last years of the Xia dynasty, there was an extremely serious flood in Changye. The rain poured for a whole month and the sky was filled with thunder and lightning. When the flood subsided, the people discovered that the tombs near Changye had been dug up. After some investigation, they found out that it was foreign thieves. They heard that a prime minister was resting here. The thieves suspected that there was something valuable buried in the tomb, so they took advantage of the flood to dig up the tomb. Huang Song naturally knew who the prime minister was. It was the controversial prime minister Huang Fu. Cheng Jing continued, the thieves searched the prime minister's tomb but did not find anything valuable buried with him. The coffin in the center of the tomb was washed out by the rain. After the thieves left, the coffin was discovered by a woodcutter. The woodcutter used a hatchet to chop the coffin into firewood and carried it home. The headless corpse was exposed in the wilderness. From then on, thunderstorms frequently occurred in Changye, and the people did not dare to go out at night. More than one commoner said that when they went out during a thunderstorm, they would always see an army camp with 1,000,000 soldiers outside the town. Not only were there ghost soldiers and ghost generals, but the tents were also lit with ghost fire. The common people were afraid that the ghost soldiers would harm them, so they moved away from Changye one after another. Over time, Changye became an uninhabited ghost land. Huang Song said awkwardly, "Isn't this a ghost story?" He was a little scared of ghosts. Cheng Jing said, "It is indeed a story." After all, Huang Song had asked him what kind of place Changye was, and Cheng Jing had brought out the story. Huang Song. Scaring people in broad daylight. Huang Song carefully examined the terrain of Changye, and had to admit that Cheng Jing's choice was correct. However, Huang Song teased, "What if the ghost soldiers jump out and interfere when I'm fighting against Lanting?" Cheng Jing glanced at his lord as if he was looking at an idiot. Was this something he should be concerned about now? Reality proved that a ghost story was ultimately just a story. Changye would become uninhabited because there had been an outbreak of a plague. The source of the plague was a flood that washed a large number of floating corpses into Changye. The corpses polluted the water and caused the common people to fall ill. More than half of the common people died, and the remaining half moved away. Huang Song and Cheng Jing reached a consensus, but they were strongly opposed by the others in the tent. Yuan Xian's eldest son, Yuan Kuang, was one of the most vehement opponents. "My lord, why do we have to retreat? What Changye? That place is too open, and it's not conducive for our army to fight." Yuan Kuang really did not understand. What was so bad about staying in Zhonghe County? At least there was enough food. What was the point of going to Changye? Without the terrain to rely on, how could they fight a war? Because Huang Song had punished Yuan Kuang's status was not as good as before. He was not a meticulous person, so he was only pushed out by others to stand out. His purpose was to bear Huang Song's anger, and at the same time, to sound out Huang Song's intentions. Huang Song glanced at Yuan Kuang and did not speak. Instead, it was Cheng Jing who explained patiently, but it was unknown whether he was telling Yuan Kuang or the others. Cheng Jing said, "Zhonghe County is not a place that is easy to defend and difficult to attack. Lu Shi has sufficient troops. If he uses the strategy of besieging us and cutting off our food and water, how will we respond? This is the first reason. The second reason is that Lu Shi's troops will be split into two. They will attack from both sides and deal with them at the same time. As time goes on, we will still be at a disadvantage. Rather than sinking deeper into this predicament, it's better to break free as soon as possible and fight to the death." If Huang Song wanted to stay in Zhonghe County, it would be more convenient for him to return to Haozhou. Huang Song's goal was for the two armies to confront each other and decide the winner in one go. Changye was a good place for a decisive battle. They did not have many advantages that they could use, and neither did the enemy. If they were to compare, Jiang Pengji would be at a greater disadvantage in the Battle of Changye. Huang Song had taken over the autumn grain in Zhonghe County, so he did not have the burden of the grain line. Jiang Pengji had to spare extra effort to protect the grain line. Yuan Kuang's personality was like that of his late father, Yuan Xian, but he was not as experienced as Yuan Xian and did not have the right to take advantage of his seniority. Huang Song would not change his mind because of the opposition of others as long as there were no problems with his principles. Yuan Kuang was dissatisfied, but he was no match for Jiang Pengji. He could only suppress his anger. Everyone saw Huang Song's determination and had no choice but to agree. At that moment, someone asked, "The autumn harvest is not over yet. What should we do with the grain in the fields? Leave it for the enemy to collect?" Huang Song said indifferently, "Set it on fire and burn it. If he did not have it, others could not have it either." That night, a huge fire broke out in Xueqi County. The intensity of the fire was frightening. Zhang Pengji was woken up by someone. She was wearing pajamas and a large cloak. "Is Xueqi County on fire? What happened?" She looked in the direction of Xueqi County. Flames filled the sky and dyed the dark sky red. The color was between red and orange. No one was sure. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, "Could it be that Luoyue and the rest finally found an opportunity to burn Bogeo's precious autumn grain?" Luoyue was also dumbfounded. This fire was very similar to the one at Sanshan Valley. The tongue of fire seemed to want to burn everything. Who set this fire? Luoyue indicated that it was not him. Huang Song's army took advantage of the opportunity when the fire attracted the enemy's attention and retreated safely. However, they did not rest easy for long. Zhang Pengji reacted after half a day. Zhang Pengji said in surprise, "Bogeo retreated? But this direction doesn't seem to be retreating to Haozhou or Hejian County." Wei Ci said, "This direction is Changye." Zhang Pengji looked in the direction that he was pointing. The sand table was clear at a glance. She instantly understood Huang Song's intentions. Chapter 13:18. A commander of the Federal Army who did not stream diligently was not a good ruler. There were too few forms of entertainment in ancient times. Without the salted fish who talked nonsense in the streaming room, what fun would there be in life? Zhang Pengji had just started the streaming room when 850,000 salted fish flooded in. Her nose seemed to smell the salty smell of the sea. Of course, the screen full of greetings of "Good morning" warmed her heart. Lemon slice soaking water. "Good morning, streamer. Why do I feel that the surroundings are strange?" Meal for the emperor. "It's indeed strange. Is it because of the air?" The audience muttered in their hearts. Zhang Pengji did not answer. She finished the rough pancakes in her hand and drank a bowl of thick porridge with meat broth. Seeing her stretch out her tongue to lick the porridge off the corner of her mouth, one of the audience lamented. "Lemon honey tea. Streamer, you're the first Duke of Dongqing. If you round it up, you're the leader of the country. Your food should be more exquisite. Didn't the ancients say that one could never get tired of eating delicacies? Seeing you in such a pitiful state every day, I'm embarrassed to eat a sumptuous meal." Although it sounded like he was showing off, he was right. Zhang Pengji really did not care about him. She did not answer. Instead, she walked out of the military tent and gestured for the audience to look in a certain direction. Huang Bogeo was really generous last night. He burned half of the autumn grain in Zhanghe district. That's more than 1,000,000 dawn of grain. Zhang Pengji sighed. She knew what Huang Song meant. He burned the autumn grain that could not be harvested in time and did not leave a single grain for her. She did not lack grain, but she was not rich either. It was better to live a simple life. It would prevent her from going from extravagance to frugality. There were people who specially baked rough pancakes and cooked thick porridge for her breakfast. It was a good treatment. The audience did not understand Zhang Pengji's sentiments. Instead, they stared at the thick gray smoke on the screen, dumbfounded. Setting a mountain on fire and spending the rest of his life in prison. In her era, Huang Song's actions would not be as simple as going to prison. He would even have to pay with his life. The fire was not small. It spread throughout the fertile fields in Zhanghe district. The fire had been burning since last night. It was estimated that it would burn for another day. Feng Ziyi. The people of Hu County are too pitiful. The grain that they painstakingly planted for a year has been destroyed by 2 wastrels. Luoyue burned hundreds of miles of fertile fields in the Sanshan Valley, while Huang Song burned the ripe crops in Zhanghe district. According to the price of goods in ancient times, these 2 fellows would definitely be in the top 3 of the list of prodigals. Zhang Pengji said, "Fighting a war is a money-burning activity." The audience in the streaming room thought about Zhang Pengji's breakfast and the food that was destroyed by the 2 fires. Even they could not help but feel sorry for her. Tudu Feiqiu. That's not right. Huang Song's troops are in Zhanghe County. Why would he burn this place down? It didn't make sense. The audience's attention was focused on Huang Song as a prodigal, and neglected other areas. Ling Jun soon won Ruo. They must have retreated when the fire attracted the attention of the host army. The audience chimed in one after another, and they managed to piece together the truth. Jiang Pengji didn't lead the troops to chase after Huang Song last night. Instead, she gave the troops a night to adjust their state of mind. Only on the second day did they break camp and march. However, she did not immediately head to Changye to fight with Huang Song, because Huang Song had adopted a stance of fighting to the death. Jiang Pengji could not afford to be complacent. She said to the people beside her, "Let's meet up with Luo Yue and the others first. I've thought about some things for a long time. I can't let others take advantage of me." "What is it?" Naturally, it was to punish the traitor who had betrayed her. Han Yu said, "Why don't we keep these people and deal with them later?" Of course, he hated traitors, but wouldn't it be a bad time to deal with them? They should focus on the battle with Huang Song. Those traitors were not worthy of the Lord's time and effort to deal with them. Jiang Pengji smiled. "Wenbin, you can't settle the score like this. When I told others that I was sick, they climbed over the wall and stabbed me in the back. I even caught them red-handed. What wouldn't they do when they knew that they were going to die? If I were to fight Bogeo and they played dirty tricks, flirted with Bogeo, and set me up, how would I settle the score? Even if Bogeo was more skilled, these people wouldn't have to die. Instead, they would become heroes who claimed credit from Bogeo. Wouldn't that be letting them off easy?" Han Yu had finally witnessed his lord's narrow-mindedness and ability to hold a grudge. He sighed. "They are just some fickle villains. There is no need for my lord to delay the battle and specially deal with them." Although that was what he said, Han Yu did not stop Jiang Pengji. It would only take 1 or 2 days, and they could afford to wait. Besides, killing these traitors as a sacrifice could also boost the morale of the army. It was not a bad thing. There were 2 groups of people who had betrayed Jiang Pengji. The first group was from Zhanghe County. These people not only betrayed her, but they also put their betrayal into practice. In the end, they turned to Huang Song. These people were still under Huang Song's protection. If Jiang Pengji wanted to kill them, Huang Song would have to be involved. The second group was those who flirted with Huang Song and secretly communicated with him. They had not yet climbed over to Huang Song's side. They were arrested by Luo Yue and kept under strict supervision. Jiang Pengji now had to deal with these people. After spending most of the day, Jiang Pengji and Luo Yue's troops successfully met up. When Luo Yue saw Jiang Pengji, he immediately got off his horse and apologized. "I was not strict in commanding the troops, so the villains took advantage of the loopholes and caused us to lose the battle. Please punish me, my lord." Honest Yang Jingrong. Wait, since when did the host have such a person? Most of the audience was unfamiliar with Luo Yue. Many of the older audience members could not remember who he was. If it was not for Jiang Pengji's outstanding memory, she might have forgotten about Luo Yue, who did not fight for anything and had no sense of presence. You can't be blamed for the incident in Hu County. Although you are responsible, you only have to bear 30% of the responsibility. As for the burning of the grain in Sanshan Valley, it was forced by the situation after all. The most important thing is to protect the troops and horses in the camp. The grain can be planted again if it's gone, but the people are gone. Jiang Pengji did not put all the blame on Luo Yue, but she did not say that he was not at fault either. In the end, she heavily punished Luo Yue with a few months' worth of military pay and reprimanded him verbally. "What about those people? Have you seen them all?" Jiang Pengji asked. Luo Yue was stunned for a moment. He did not know who she was referring to. Only Meng Heng reacted. "My lord wants to interrogate them now?" Jiang Pengji said coldly. "Kill them as a sacrifice to the flag and the souls of the heroes. If we don't interrogate them now, are we going to keep them alive for the new year?" She did not make the people who betrayed her pay the price immediately. Instead, she allowed them to linger on for a few months. This was already very merciful. Meng Heng sent someone to bring in the group of masterminds. He also handed a treasured name list to Jiang Pengji. Looking at the situation, everyone was confident. The salted fish in the live stream was anxious and fearful. He had a feeling that something big was going to happen. AI de Tian Lingling. Streamer, what are you doing? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.